As always, let's stand. There we go. And wait for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. Welcome to our first of several May meetings. This is Teacher Appreciation Week. I wish I could read everyone's name and individually recognize each teacher who makes a Jericho education so special, but I will not. Hopefully you already feel extremely appreciated, and on behalf of the board, I thank each of our educators. I also want to thank our various PTA groups that organize teacher appreciation lunches as we are about to begin those events at the elementary schools. Some quick items. As AP testing continues into next week, good luck to all of our sophomores, juniors, and seniors. We will have another special board meeting, which you all look forward to, this Monday, the 11th, beginning at 6:30, to address Section 7000 of our policy manual. Given there are only 2 candidates running for the board's 2 open seats in the May 19th election, I do not believe the PTA will be hosting a Meet the Candidates event that evening. While I love a good election, it is rewarding to know that the community has such confidence in this board's judgment and actions that there is no contested seat this year. I know we will all work to maintain that confidence and trust, with one key component being a willingness to openly discuss any issue or concern any member of the community wishes to raise at these public meetings. However, we will have the mandatory budget hearing meeting on Tuesday, May 21st at 7 p.m. in the Little Theater. We will review the proposed budget for the 26-27 school year and the capital project. I'm sorry, May 12th, dyslexic, I apologize. Budget hearing will be on May 12th, 1 week before our election. May 12th at 7 p.m. We'll review the budget for the 26-27 school year and the capital projects for which the district is asking for resident approval. This includes resident approval to use funds already in reserves explicitly set aside for capital projects in Capital Reserve 5. As any informed person who follows this board understands, any money spent from Capital Reserve 5 requires separate voter approval. This administration, this board, and the district cannot spend that money without such approval. Finally, we will discuss the establishment of Capital Reserve 6, which will be governed by the same spending restrictions I just outlined, as well as the separate budget for the Jericho Library. Now, moving on to fun business. Our entire community, and particularly our Cantiac community, has been eagerly awaiting our first piece of business this evening. So I will quickly read the motion and then turn it over to Dr. Kravitz to make the introduction. We're going to go to Schedule G in today's board packet. Whereas the following named administrator is recommended for appointment to a probationary term as superintendent of schools in accordance with the Education Law, Section 3012, Subdivision 1, little b. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the following be appointed to the position indicated, the annual salary, and the period set forth. For the grand reveal, I turn it over to our superintendent, Dr. Robert Kravitz.
Thank you so much, Mr. Conlon. I am pleased to share that tonight in our audience we have our new principal of Cantiac Elementary, Ms. Lauren Sharfstein. Congratulations to Lauren. Ms. Sharfstein joins us from the Mamaroneck Union Free School District, where she has served with distinction as the principal of Chatsworth Elementary School for the past 4 years. A native of Long Island, Lauren is returning home and brings with her a strong track record of leadership, dedication, and commitment to student success, also working with a New Jersey superintendent in Mamaroneck, I might add.
Lucky.
Yes, we are so lucky. We are excited about the future and look forward to partnering with all of you as we continue to build on a strong foundation established by Dr. Joe Sapienza. We extend our sincere appreciation to Dr. Sapienza for his leadership and wish him continued success and fulfillment in his new central office role. Thank you to all of the Jericho community for your ongoing support and commitment to all of our students. So welcome, Lauren.
jumped the gun. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mrs. Citron. Second, thank you, Mrs. Vartnoff. Would you like to repeat or we're good to go? We're good to go. Any other discussion other than congratulations to Mrs. Sharfstein? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. While we were addressing schedules and already had a brief detour to the May 19th election, let's quickly return to Schedule GG, election. Whereas Superintendent of Schools has recommended the following persons for service as indicated, now therefore be it resolved that the following appointed to serve as clerks or inspectors for the May 19th, 2026 district election and paid accordingly. It is the last schedule in the packet. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Ms. Varno. Second. Thank you, Mr. Jin. All in favor? Any discussion? All in favor? We are now set for our May 19th election. Good luck, Mr. Manuel. I would like, again, to turn the meeting over to Dr. Kravitz to introduce our presenters this evening.
Good evening, everyone, again, and we are very proud to have the TLE group who has been working within our district for our strategic planning. This evening, they will go over what the survey looked like, what the questions we asked, and glean some information from there, as well as start to help draft our goals for the upcoming 26-27 school year. So I welcome Jim McLaughlin and Michelle Aquino from the TLE group. Thank you.
Okay, Michelle's going to hand out some papers, and I just want to again thank the board. It's nice to meet the board in person. I know we met virtually and we've met some of the members at the forums, but it's nice to see everyone all together and to be a part of your meeting tonight. And we have enjoyed our work thus far and look forward to our continued work in the Jericho schools. So tonight we are going to give an overview of the process itself, some of the results and the priorities that came out of those results and thought exchange. We're going to talk a bit about the SOAR analysis, which is the structure in which we used to look at the results and to guide the thought questions that the committee had. And then, as Dr. Kravitz mentioned, really exciting, share goals and objectives that we believe will get us launched on our first year of a 3-year plan, and then what next steps will follow. So as a review, this is the strategic plan process. Phase 1 is discovery, that's consultations and the SOAR analysis, and that's what we did right here in this room for a couple of live forums. We did some virtual forums. We've had discussions with administration, and that's all part of the discovery that goes into the analysis that occurs. The SOAR analysis, which looks at strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. And that's a little bit of the structure that we'll talk about in a minute that was utilized. So we've completed phase 1. And phase 2 is the goal setting and the public presentation. So that's where we are tonight. We're right in phase 2. Phase 3 will be the actual implementation of the first year plan on a page. The goals that kick off the long-term plan that strategically will help the district reach what the community has identified as its priorities. And then phase 4 is the coaching component, because the most important piece, obviously, is that you don't just have a plan, but the plan goes into action. And we will be there to work with folks as they tailor the plan to the specific local school communities that they lead within the Jericho School District and with central administration. So just to break down where we've been right now, we've had the forums, as I've mentioned. There have been templates and samples that were shared to kind of get us moving in that direction. There's been a web page. Thank you, Maggie, for keeping that so detailed for us, just to make sure that the whole community sees this as a very transparent process. That's very important to the work that we're doing and that we've been tasked with by the administration to make sure that every step along the way, all the thoughts that were shared, whether they were the highest rated thoughts or not, are shared through the webpage, and that all the steps of the process are there for the school community to look at whenever they want to consult it. The strategic plan template are goals and objectives and action steps on one page, which we continue to call Plan on a Page, making it very accessible, very usable, to put it out in front of folks throughout the school year in all the different arenas in which they operate, so that this plan is truly alive. And then the public presentation to the board, which we are doing tonight. And I'm sure you'll see us again, which we look forward to in the future.
Thank you and good evening. In your folders, what we provided the trustees is on the left side is just a slide deck, as well as a sample of the goals and objectives that are drafted that we will share with you this evening. On the right side are the results of each of the exchanges from the SOAR analysis. So we wanted to make sure that the trustees had each of the individual thoughts that were shared as a result of the strengths, the opportunities, the aspirations, and the results. This is the data that is posted on your webpage right now, which was the first exchange that went out, but just to review it, because it was a big part of creating the goals and objectives, just as the SOAR was. And as an overview of the original question, which was really what are the priorities first and foremost, there was solid participation that had occurred through this exchange. And I think what's really nice is you had 351 individual thoughts that were rated, but you had over 700 people that individually went in and rated. So while they may not have contributed an individual thought, they were a part of the feedback circle. And this is where you can find the data, and certainly I'm assuming the SOAR analysis results will be also posted now that it's presented to the board as well. So in the priorities, some of the key guiding priorities that all stakeholders recognize were recruiting the best teachers, a world-class teaching force, putting in front of the students in Jericho. Computers and online management really had a very strong presence across all of the questions, and you'll see that in the goals and objective piece, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Student engagement and increasing hands-on engagement and work. And then again, related to the computer and online management, there was a heavy feedback cycle around limiting Chromebook access and ensuring that web pages were educationally appropriate and not gaming. Here is an example of just the top rated thoughts, which you will see fit into those priorities that we had talked about. And again, all of the thoughts are listed right now on the website for anyone's review publicly. When we dove a little bit more deeply into that, you really were able to pull out some themes from those top priorities, and making sure that homework is meaningful came out as a significant theme, as well as revisiting the robotics club really found itself across the themes. Ensuring that artificial intelligence is utilized in a responsible and educational way came across as a significant theme, and again, revisiting the computer games that we had talked about. Social emotional learning, which we'll dive a little bit more deeply in the SOAR analysis, and ensuring that parent communication remains at the forefront. So the SOAR analysis is when we had hosted each of the forums, and that's where, to the trustees, you see a lot of paper in front of you, but we wanted to make sure that you were able to see each individual thought that was contributed across all stakeholder groups. So the first question on the SOAR analysis were the strengths. And what we've done for each of the questions is really created a 2 to 3 slide overview to give you a flavor of what the priorities were identified by stakeholders. But certainly, Jericho was identified by the largest strength, which of course dedicated staff. You saw across the themes that the staff were really the engine of ensuring that the students were learning, and that came across loud and clear and very highly rated. Another strength was the supportive environment, and not only a collaborative community, but the strong relationships across the community and all stakeholders. And then parental involvement was seen as a significant strength, a very active parent community, and that being, of course, another primary engine of the success of the community. Regarding academic excellence, of course, that goes without saying. I mean, Jericho is the top-rated school district, and you had seen that the top areas that stakeholders had really identified in academic excellence was the rigor, and ensuring that those standards continue to be high standards of excellence, driving national rankings, an expansive range of opportunities for students, and then really focusing on college prep and leadership. For challenges, and I will go through the challenges, but one of the questions we had asked were, what are the opportunities, right? What are the greatest challenges that the schools are facing? So in that area, student engagement was identified as a key challenge in the sense of making sure that we continue to increase student engagement through teaching methods, reducing pressure. You'll see that as a theme throughout, that delicate balance of academic achievement and decreasing pressure, and ensuring that teaching methodology is remaining innovative. Maintaining the high, yes.
Are you taking questions now?
Sure.
For student engagement, are you sure, and I'm not saying you're not, I just want to show, that when you're talking about increasing student engagement, they're talking about in-class engagement and they're not talking about school community engagement?
So they're talking about in-class, making sure that we are maintaining the in-class was the theme that was really pulled as a priority.
The getting kids to pay attention in class?
Nope, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that clarifying question. The focus when we had pulled the thoughts was really making sure that classroom instruction continues to be engaging and innovative. It was not as a challenge that our students are not engaged. That was not the challenge at all. It was really making sure that we're engaging our students in a manner that is staying with the most innovative teaching strategies. So really linked into STEM, robotics, and maintaining, that was really the gist, maintaining the course of engagement. And I think you'll be able to see it go a little bit further through. But again, making sure that there's a balance of high academic standards and wellness was also identified as a key challenge, and then reducing screen over reliance. I would say this bottom priority links into the top priority as well. So that was another component. There was a lot of, when you pulled the threads and looked at the threads, there was a lot of connection between technology and engagement and feedback saying, reducing in-class technology, ensuring that in-class technology is not focused on gaming, that we're not circumventing any networks, and that we're maintaining the course on the content in the classroom. There was a lot of feedback about finding that balance between paper and pencil and technology straight through. So that first and that last are truly linked. None of them had spoken about students not being engaged in content. It was more or less of how do we maximize that and find that perfect balance. Another area of opportunity, I will say, but certainly identified as a challenge, was really making sure that there's the balance of stress and anxiety and content. So whether it is the competitive feel or expanding social emotional learning opportunities, that came across loud and clear, and giving students tools to find that balance in a way that doesn't detract from their academic experience, but it may provide additional measures. And then parental pressure was an area that was also identified as a challenge in talking about community workshops and how do we really find that balance with it. Discipline and support was an area, making sure that student behavior is managed fairly and consistently. Implementing district-wide initiatives to really look at any bullying behaviors that may or may not be happening, and then continuing to make sure that any students that require specialized support are getting that support, primarily in the areas of special education and E&L had risen to the top of a lot of the feedback as well.
So continuing on the continuum of the SOAR, strengths, opportunities, aspirations. And aspirations don't necessarily mean things that have to be different. Aspirations from the community can be things that the community wants to see that's already in place, remain in place. They could be things that are new and that are increased, and sometimes they can be things that we may aspire to see less of. But basically, this is where the SOAR analysis starts to move into the helpful planning, the ideas for what the objectives and the goals can say. And so here in the aspirational themes, it begins, and this dovetails with one of the last things we said in the prior category: mental health and well-being, better pressure management and mental health support for kids, and really prioritizing that in terms of the aspirations for the district. Continuing, and this is why I mentioned before, it doesn't necessarily need to be something different. It can be something that the community wants to see remain in place. Academic excellence and balance, and we've heard the word balance a few times in a few different ways. Promoting that healthy balance between school work and school life and life after school. Aspirations, also around the theme of inclusivity and future preparedness, community engagement, where there's an inclusive environment where diversity and bonds are strengthened, so that the community that Jericho has indicated they have always felt remains intact, and technology and innovation. Integrating artificial intelligence and emerging tech into the curriculum. Introducing robotics into the curriculum at the elementary schools was a specific area that was mentioned. We've kind of heard, it's great when you see the connection between what people are saying in their aspirations and what they're saying in the prior levels of the SOAR analysis. So technology was a big theme that came up in many different ways. And then continuing with aspirations, looking at character and values education, character building. How can we continue to develop and build character alongside of academic achievement, so that it's not over tilted in terms of academics, but that we again see that evenness to our approach. And holistic development, encouraging a well-rounded approach that encompasses social, emotional, and academic growth for every Jericho student. And some of these things, like holistic development and character building, are going to sound alike, but we felt that they were distinct enough to build them out next to each other. So we always say the most important part of the SOAR analysis are the results, because these are the things that we're going to use to say whether or not this plan is effective. What will the results be, or what are the results we expect to show that we're making progress? And in terms of asking the community for that, what we've heard is regular surveys conducted with teachers, students, and parents to ensure diverse voices within the community are heard and integrated, that there's a continuing engagement about this plan, that there are open communication channels that actively involve teachers in the critical decision-making process, and that there's data analysis that occurs. That collection of data and that look at data to assess progress in all the areas that are identified as goals, and specifically in the areas of reducing student stress and anxiety levels effectively. So visible milestones. What will be clear, measurable objectives that lead to visible improvements in student engagement and daily behavior? Tracking students' well-being and staff morale, using indicators of positive and productive school climate, and then regular updates to the community.
And if I could just go back to this for one moment, this is a really important slide, because this is how the stakeholders are saying they would like to be updated on the progress as it's going. This was coming directly from the exchange from all of the stakeholders, whether staff, admin, whoever it might have been, community members. So this really is one to lean into once everything is complete. So earlier in the presentation, Jim had talked about our producibles and where we are. And where we are today is really about objectives and goals. And once that is finalized and Dr. Kravitz meets and speaks with the board, and the goals and objectives feel like there's something that everyone can lean into for the defined amount of time of the plan, which I think is going to be 3 years, then we will move into the action steps. So the action steps will be crafted every year by the admin team, and then that will be driving the work of what the district will look like for that year. There will be no surprises. Everyone will know where we're going. So the first is really leaning into student well-being, and creating an inclusive, supportive environment that prioritizes mental health, etc. The two objectives that were pulled as priorities from the data set were one, researching and implementing school-wide mental health initiatives by the 27-28 school year, aiming to reduce anxiety as measured by wellness assessments. With the second objective, making sure that 100% of the staff is trained in mental health awareness and support strategies so there is a consistent approach. Yes?
So when you say this is our strategic goal, does that mean most every action we take is directed towards this goal?
Yes. So for example, if these are the goals and objectives that are adopted by the district, then what will happen is the admin team will define what those action steps will be for each objective so that we know what we're going to be accomplishing and measuring even more specifically. But every year that has to change, because if it's a multi-year goal, then you basically will need different steps that will be committed to and hold accountable and report out to, whether it's in the board report, the community report, the newsletters, making sure that those accomplishments are really, everyone knows.
But I'm trying to understand how you create a program where if your number one strategic goal is student well-being, how does that play into creating a high-level academic environment, since in many respects those two are in diametric opposition with each other?
I think it's a really good clarification to make. Strategic goal 1 doesn't mean it's the highest goal. It's all of the goals, and we'll go through the goals, which address various parts of what we've already discussed. For example, academics, which is definitely going to be within the goals that the board's going to consider, or at least the ones that have been drafted for the board to consider. So whether it's 1, 2, or 3, the placement is not meant to say this is a higher goal than that goal. I think one of the key pieces, and I think what you alluded to before, which is so important, is that these priorities deal with the top areas that have been identified by the school community, so that when the board has a decision to make about one of the varied issues that come before the board all the time, and particularly if they have the budget monies towards it, they can say, does this fit into our strategic plan? And is it one of the goals that we've identified for this year? And that should be a critical consideration about supporting whatever decision is made. Not that there can't be exceptions, because there are things that come up that sometimes, will surpass, what's on the strategic plan. But it provides a basis for the board to come back to and say, within this given school year, this is what we've identified as our top goals, and the things that we are accomplishing and making decisions on should fit into this whenever possible.
And the idea of the academic achievement is that is at the top of, once the plan on the page is done, we had dialogued about that being at the top 100%, because that is something that drives, that Jericho is known for, right? So that continues with all of these things occurring simultaneously. The second goal, in no particular order, that was looked at was the resource utilization and making sure that resources are optimized for the learning environment. Now, we can certainly continue to add language about the high achieving as making sure that's a part of every goal without question. And then when you were looking at the feedback and all of the thoughts and the information that was coming back, it was really centered around classroom technology and maximizing that. And making sure that, there was a lot of commentary about some of the programs that were in the classroom that might have had more of a gaming component to it, and kind of really making sure that we remove some of those items. And it was really about conducting the classroom evaluation of technology, identifying the adjustments to reduce that technology where appropriate, implementing usage policies to reduce non-education screen time and increase focus and engagement. There was a lot of information about non-education screen time being at the forefront. But the action steps are where the work is being done within those. And then the third goal was really about safety and future ready learning environments, security measures, AI practices, and the two objectives centered around there are regarding AI and security measures. And those were the three goals when we had dialogues. Of course, some districts may go with a fourth goal. That's always an option as well. These came to the forefront from the content with the idea that student achievement, certainly we can continue to state that as an explicit goal, but that's really the culture of the district. So talking about all of the things that are being done simultaneously to maintaining student achievement in the school district. So I'm gonna stop there before we round out, and I think you guys will have dialogue about some of the goals and objectives that were drafted. But we wanna be able to answer any questions on the road here or the identification of the goals and objectives of where we are thus far.
Can you just clarify, what's the next step?
That's a good question. So once the goals and objectives are adopted, if this is where the district determines to land, if there's a conversation that you have, you wanna go back, but once the goals and objectives are finalized, then what we will do is we will work with Dr. Kravitz to set up a time to come in and work with the administrative team, bringing forth, these are the goals and objectives that have been identified, and really having really a half a day, so to say, where the administrative team is identifying the actions that they are seeing for this upcoming school year that will fit under each of those objectives. And once all of that brainstorm is done, really we will work with Dr. Kravitz and anyone else at that table to really streamline and identify those action steps that would be for this upcoming school year, so that this plan on the page is ready for publication, presentation, and is just, it's what you leave with starting July 1.
So this work will happen over the summer, and then at what point does the community, does the board get to see, like in a year's time, do we get to see this is where we're at, this is what we actually accomplished, like we wrote everything out, but now a report card, so to speak.
Yes, and that report card really goes back to what the community was saying the indicators of success have to be that they're looking for. So ideally, having the action steps done before July 1st would be great, just because you want to start the year, because things happen in the summer and it gets busier. So really you want to begin the year with that, begin all of the board conversations around that, convocation, school meetings, school goals. School and departmental goals ideally over the summer should be built on this plan and the action steps that are identified. However they may be, whether it's qualitative and quantitative, however it's organized accordingly. And ready to go at the start of the year, everyone knows the direction you're going. Then ideally, and this would come from how, you decide as your communication, whether it's a mid-year progress, an end of the year progress. I mean, that's really district level decision making. But at a minimum, at the midpoint of the school year and at the close of the school year, there should be progress reported about the action step completion. So, generally, usually around December, January, the admin team gets together, talks about what they've done, what still needs to be done, that's reported. Same thing at the close of the school year. That has to be progress monitored. Some districts may decide to put that up on the website and make sure that the community is aware. The opportunities are endless, right? You can do it in the weekly board reports. It could happen at a Board of Education meeting, in the newsletters that go out. That is really at the superintendent's discretion. Yes.
So I apologize if I show this. You said there were 718 respondents, I think, earlier on. Do you know the makeup of those respondents? Were they all parents? Were they teachers? Were they students?
So we did not drill that down. We don't have that drilled down to be able to identify whether that was not a part of the exchange. But what we are aware.
I don't think it was students responding. Was this sent? I don't remember who it was sent to. That's what I'm trying to understand. It was mostly sent to parents, correct?
And staff, I believe, right? Yes.
So staff. So when you go back to the slide you shot, the question I had, and
Yes.
maybe no, not this, the one we were at where you had, before I started asking my question.
The results?
Yeah, the results.
Okay.
The first one that you had there, this one,
Yes.
it talks about student engagement and daily classroom behavior that we want to improve it. I would expect that the staff, if they're responding to this, aren't saying we're doing a bad job keeping our students engaged and instilling good classroom behavior. So I would expect that milestone came from the parents. And I'm trying to understand how the parents would know about daily classroom behavior and student engagement. So I'm not trying to question the finding,
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand, given you guys have spent a lot of time thinking about this, how do I tie that together? Unless Dr. Harnett wants to say that his people don't think his people are doing a good job.
No, I would never say that.
Exactly, so I don't
I-
understand how we're supposed to, what we're supposed to.
One thing I
Exact
would
opposite.
caution everyone about is saying that anyone's doing a bad job, because I don't believe that that's
No, I'm not saying
necessarily,
a bad
yeah.
job, but like, I wouldn't expect that a teacher would say, yes, I've got to figure out a way to improve.
Yeah, that
staff
might not have
engagement.
been from,
Right, so
but-
I'm trying to understand how a
but we
parent
did,
would
you
know
know,
that.
all members, well, you know, we're all, well, most of us are
They have
parents, and we
opinions. No, they have
probably have
opinions.
opinions about what
But
happens in
that's
the
not-
classroom.
yes.
So, by opening this up to the community, we say every stakeholder's input is important. And one of the reasons that we utilize the instrument that we do is that we also look for ratings, so that this isn't a voice in the wilderness, you know, that's just loud and gets heard. The milestones and the well-being monitoring and all of these pieces too will also be put out in front of the administration, as we were saying, in front of the leadership team to craft action steps around. Those folks have a framework of the district in their mind. They're in the classrooms. They see the instruction that's happening. They have daily contact with the teaching staff. So this has to be something that that we hear and that is put into a practical method of implementation that isn't divorced from reality. I think that's where at least the way I'm hearing your thoughts. We don't want to craft a plan around perceptions from folks who may not have firsthand knowledge of it. However, you know, to be fair too, we did meet. We had great participation by the staff in terms of the forum that we had with them. Everybody has had input into some piece of the plan. One of the reasons we don't identify roles is we thought it's very important to have anonymity involved in this, so that people feel they can give their input without having any kind of perceived repercussions. So things that could be used necessarily to identify someone, really we try to avoid that, so that it's just an open slate. But there's a positive and a negative that could go with that. Yes?
Thank you, I think that's helpful. In terms of the anonymity piece, I was gonna mention, even if you were to split up the 700 plus participants by role, there's still aggregate data, so you probably could gauge, you know, of the cohort, how many, I imagine there's a couple hundred, at least parents, several, you know, tens of staff at least. So I would imagine that even if you were to split it up very broadly into parent community and staff, and potentially keep administration teachers within one aggregate cohort, you still would be able to at least understand some of what Sam is asking in terms of in-classroom activities and who's bringing that up as a possible challenge. And in terms of all of the goals and objectives, something like, student anxiety measurement, I imagine there are validated tools that we can use. I know Dr. Price mentioned that to us from the PTA standpoint, that these are something that they've been thinking about. But do all of these objectives, not this one in particular, but the subsequent slides, have measurable ways to look at it? The idea of engagement in the classroom, which right now I imagine we want a baseline and then to see how it improves. How is that measured? Because that might be another way to look at this particular area.
So when we get to the action step portion of it, one of the reasons that or one of the roles that we play in that process is as the district leadership is suggesting this will work here in this part of the district, we will continue to reinforce the framework that this must be measurable. How are we going to measure that? So as those ideas are generated, they'll be written in a smart fashion, so that there is an accountability attached to each goal, and it's very clear how that will be measured. Even to the point of saying we will use this type of instrument or this type of data collection to measure that goal.
So do all of the objectives that you've posed so far have the ability to turn into a SMART objective?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
And you had asked a great question. Very often the wellness assessments will have the component for a parent, staff member, students, where you're able to really pull out components of that do ask questions about engagement in items as such that come straight from the students. Yes.
Just to go back to what Mr. Cronin was talking about, the idea of this objective of engaging students, one of the things that I think we talked about earlier was to continue to do this, that this is part of what the Jericho teachers and the community deeply values, that we can't deliver rigor without that engagement, and we keep pushing that. And as most teachers know, my period 3 class engaging period 3 might be completely different than how I have to engage period 5. So the techniques can change from year to year, but they can change from period to period. And I think as a community and as teachers, that's a great part of our desire to continue to keep learning and changing and evolving to deal with what's in front of us as we encounter different types of students, different types of technologies, and changing curriculum that goes along with it. So that's all.
So you pick top 3 topics out of everything. Do you have any backup plans if these topics didn't work out? So for example, do you have any scientific way to prove, let's say we're adopting one of the Chromebooks, 30% reduce of Chromebook using. How do we know scientifically that 30% of Chromebook use is going to have a negative impact or positive impact? How are we going to come to that resolution?
So, and I think you're referencing the device usage policies.
Right.
So that's a great question, and I think where we would need to start with that is having a conversation with the leadership team about what does that look like in the district, talking about the usage policies, taking a look at how really setting guidelines, right, for the classroom, looking at filters, ensuring that the programs are aligned, everyone's on the same page with what we are using, what we're not using, how much time is agreed in the classroom for what that looks like. And then certainly you're able to look, you set filters, decide what your programs are, and then administrators are really setting the tone with their departments or their grade levels about what that looks like in the classroom. But it's really defining what that looks like in its entirety. And sometimes it might even just be removing the mystery out of opinion to a degree. So it may not be happening everywhere, but you can read the thoughts to see there is a mindset that there is uneven usage and that it might not all be engaging. So there might be an element of just bringing your community on the same page and all of your stakeholders with that mindset, with how technology is used in the classrooms. There's also a lot of research, right, around are we overusing it in classrooms and do we need to find that better balance? And there is definitely a feeling in your community through the thought, those who engaged in the thought exchange, that there might be some fine tuning on that balance. So it's our starting place and it's the information that's been brought out, and we are giving that, but we know that you need to have dialogue as a board, as a team, and then bring that feedback back. And if we have to go back to take a look at some of these and throw some out and say we want a priority in a different area, that's okay too.
So back to Mrs. Martino's question, the next step is for the board to speak with senior management and figure out, accept, reject,
Yeah.
adjust, and then give you guys the go-ahead to move forward with them to come up with the action steps that meet the objectives that supply the goals.
Correct. And that is something that certainly is a district level. You decide where you are with that, and we will work with you no matter where you fall. And if you want us to look at some different data points or pull out different areas, we're happy to do that with Dr. Kravitz for sure.
That's the district goals. District goals, then go to superintendent goals, to district, to building level goals.
One day we'll get to executing the goals. We need the goals, doing something with the goals. We spend a lot of time creating goals. Anything, Mrs. Sharfstein? You're new to this.
Well, by the way, he does this all the time, so get used to it.
She had the opportunity to leave after she was granted.
Yeah, that's what, you should have left.
Hey.
I'm glad I stayed for this.
No, just for tonight, I don't mean it in general.
I appreciate it.
Overall goal, right? I mean, certainly you could have a dedicated goal that's saying you are maintaining and exceeding your academic growth, but that can certainly be something that is at the top. Like that expectation covers everything. But really, this is where people's thoughts are and their hearts are right now. It's top of mind for them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
With the blessing of the other board members, I think we want to excuse Ms. Sia for the evening. Anyone have a problem with that? Thank you, Ms. Sia. Maybe we'll see you on, what, do you have another exam Tuesday?
Yeah.
Oh, then we won't see you Monday night. Take the night off. Unless you want to come.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alrighty, unfinished business. Be resolved, the BOE approved tabling the second reading of the following policies, sections 1000, sections 2000. Section 3000, except 3271, 3280, and 3430. Section 4000, section 5000, except 5741, and section 6000. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Barnum. Second. Thank you, Dr. Balachandra. All in favor of tabling those sections and policies? By vote, thank you. New business, be resolved that the Board of Ed accept the first reading of the following policies. 3271, solicitation of charitable donations. 3280, use of school facilities. 3430, which is currently called diversity, equity, and inclusion. And 5741, artificial intelligence. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mrs. Varnoff. Second. Thank you, Mr. Jim. Discussion. Why don't we start with 3271, solicitation of charitable donations. I believe, Mr. Superintendent, you were concerned about the appropriate guidance that you wanted in that policy. Do you feel that you have gotten the proper guidance? And take your time. There were two drafts I can show. I can give it to you. There's a BOCES draft, and then Mr. Goodstaff was kind enough to distribute his draft based on his understanding of the comments. Does anyone, the superintendent has indicated a preference for the Ingerman drafted 3271. All of these were included in the board package. Anyone have any issues with it?
I just have a question. The policy removed from the original, the part that elaborates upon like who can and who cannot solicit donations. When we discussed this last time, I think it was Ira who had suggested maybe the statement should be 501c3 designated organizations, or if it's not here, is it elsewhere? Who can and cannot solicit donations on school grounds?
Well, this is it's with the approval of the superintendent of schools, so that's,
So ultimately,
the board doesn't mean.
because in the old one, it said that the board decides, then So now it's just at the discretion of the superintendent.
And again, this is just for the board's discretion, whatever they choose.
I mean, Dr. Valentine, if you wanted to, we could figure out a way for the second week to work determine that the superintendent, if he's gonna deny a 501c3, that he's gotta tell the board he's denying it, or something like that. Where like 501c3 automatically gets approval, but maybe if he's gonna deny a 501c3, he's gotta, but anybody can appeal that to the board, so it's sort of,
That wasn't actually the part that
Oh, I'm
bothered me.
sorry,
It
go ahead.
wasn't so much who makes that decision, it's just kind of like, what is the decision based upon? Like, what organizations are permitted and aren't appointed permitted? Just, are there, like, I think in the old, I don't have the old one in front of me, but I think it was stated that political organizations and, you know, people.
No, I believe that was. That was. This is the old one. That's the old one. No, that was the other policy that we talked about last time. That was the one about political, that was about advertising.
Well, we don't have to list that here as well then.
This is for charitable donations. The other one was for advertising. Well, that was where we were talking about political activities. This is.
We don't have that, so we don't need to list that.
so
Anyone?
we don't need the 501c3, you're saying the 501c3 language wouldn't be beneficial, but
Maybe
it.
by law, the 501c3 could be considered charitable. It's charitable donations. You don't need it. If you want to add it, you can.
No, you're saying, so if somebody came in and wanted to raise it for this 501c3, you're saying the superintendent wouldn't really have a basis to say no?
Again, as long as it doesn't disrupt the educational process.
What if
Of
they
course.
don't have the 501c3?
Again, if they're not.
Then it becomes his
Still at their
discretion.
Correct.
Okay.
Which he's so discreet.
As a.
Alrighty, let's go to 3280, use of school facility.
Just as an aside, whatever made its way in the agenda was, I don't know what happened with the printing. It's not the version that I sent. Like it's missing pages. I printed it right from the website today. And it looks like it starts with page 10 of the policy and it's missing pages 1 and 2. I don't know what happened. To
Is this the one that was attached to the email you sent?
The one that you
The one that I attached the emails, the one I attached the email's fine.
That
The one that's in the
okay,
board
I didn't do that.
packet is not fine.
And I'm confused, and someone's gonna have to leave this discussion.
You have the board packet from the
Oh, you did
website?
it from the back, or
I
back in
think so, I
our
don't
email?
know what I have.
32, is it 3270?
It's number 3270.
It was 3270, but then he wrote.
It really is 32.
Yeah.
So what should it be?
3280.
It said 3270.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. BOCES reading number, whatever.
Sorry, so the new draft is gonna be 32.
80. 80.
No,
This is how it looks.
no, it's like,
It starts with page 10.
like 10 pages.
That's right, policy.
This is the one that's only like a page and a half, you're saying it should be 10 pages.
10 pages.
10 pages.
I started reading that, and it was attached to something where I thought that was the wrong policy, and I thought you'd really taken our short, brief, our brevity
No,
objective to heart.
no, not on this one. Not on this one. I think it should be rigid.
Because you don't have it. You can
But,
get
but
that.
others can comment, I'm happy, if anyone else knows it, I'm sure I agree with the four of you. And if not, we'll get it on a second
You don't
reading.
have anything to add?
Mrs. C, you had the right policy, it sounds like. What did you do?
Yeah.
I know, when I printed everything, I'm not gonna, I mean, it's 10 pages, I'm not gonna make everyone sit here. I can probably do that in 2 minutes, but.
I mean, I guess one question, when we had made rules last year, so.
These are, this is the policy.
So this is what we had.
This is what you,
adopted last year.
we didn't like, or the board didn't like in the last meeting, we talked about how basically everything that was discussed previously was good. And so the easiest way to fix a thing that's been gutted is to put it back in. So this is the policy that was already in effect.
So like, for example, I don't remember that we agreed to this, there was a 9 o'clock cutoff, like, if there's like a men's basketball league that plays in the gym, like they have to leave at 9? Is that-
It used to be 11 in the old, I say, I do have the old policy here that we did in 2023, that was
That's-
11
you
PM.
can't return to leave like that.
Well, I'm just saying that says 11 PM.
Okay, we can make it 11, I thought this was the old,
I
I thought this was
don't
the
know, I
last.
don't know in practice, I do know that there's a bunch of
Eh,
community people that use the basketball in the elementaries and the field house. So I don't know if we, say 9 o'clock in the morning. I mean, I don't know like what time you can close the building down.
During all schools and sessions, so it's 11 p.m.
We can make 10 to 11.
The question that I had was, is it reasonable to say, organizations must provide written applications at least 45 days in advance?
I thought we had the as practical, I mean, some things are practical, but
Right.
if you remember when this policy was added, there was a reason why it was supposed to, there's a reason why we put the
I understand it could be like a good safeguard.
But you can do it as practical, obviously,
As practical.
if an event pops up that's 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
And, yeah, that'd be far just because,
Okay,
so I'll make sure the as practical is in.
okay.
Just another question, so this is the same policy that, would kind of like, apply if we were hosting, agreeing to host like a debate tournament or like a multi-school event, right? In that case, more than 50% of the participants are not Jericho residents, so do we need to take that out?
Well, in that situation, it might be a licensing agreement which doesn't follow those rules. It'd be done through that, you would have it adopted, and run the same rules as this, minus the residency exception.
And they don't follow the rules.
No, they'll follow the
I don't-
rules
yeah.
under that. It's an agreement, it'll be through agreement.
I don't remember having 50%, I think we had to have some Jericho residents, I don't think it was 100%.
This is under application requirements. Number one, at least one of the participants must be a school district resident.
That's what I remember.
I'm providing value here, I haven't seen this policy.
Just really-
Yeah, it was just like what,
Well, what do we want to do?
I don't think 50% should
I
have to
think
do it
50% is
because
too high.
The whole purpose of it is because it's a school district-run building, it's being paid for by the taxpayers of the school district. And for one person, let's say there's 100 people and one person's running, why is one person being a Jericho resident being allowed to use a taxpayer facility?
Yeah.
So that was, a lot of school districts, actually have a 75%.
But 50, I'm saying if we have a debate tournament here,
That'd be through a different process, that's gonna be, and
why is
again,
it a different process?
It's more of a school-sponsored event.
school-sponsored event as opposed to community use facilities. Community use facilities is the basketball league that's run at night,
Yeah,
the Little League fields. You don't want
Yeah.
Plainview Old Bethpage to be using your Little League fields when they can use their Little League, they can use their school fields. That's the purpose of this policy. It's not for an extracurricular debate tournament that's run through the debate club or for like even again extra interscholastic sports like your swim meet or any of that. That's not what this is. This is for outside entities who wish to use your property for events.
For what wrestling tournament.
Right,
Once
I
there was-
actually,
there used to be like a.
The rest of the
a
tournament-
radio thing that used to ask. us-
Here's like the ham radio people
Yeah.
who try to use
So
it
like,
for that.
they wouldn't fit into that formula of 50%, right? Like,
they're also outside.
I know, but it's still.
it doesn't matter. I'm
The ham
saying-
radio, remember the ham radio people, they wanted to have their conference. Look, we also used to have, there used to be, doesn't exist anymore, the flag football league,
I don't deny them.
that it ended up being mostly Roslyn kids, comes to play in the Jericho flag football league.
Because if you think about it, these people using your facilities, using your custodian, using
Yeah.
your fields, using
Yeah, it's
your
resources.
resources.
Yeah.
So the reason why you put a 50% threshold on there is that if half the people that are using this facility are Jericho residents, well, then that makes sense. Your
It's justified.
taxpayers are going.
Yeah.
Your taxpayer dollars are going to people who are using those facilities.
Can we somehow get information before we make this decision on who's been using it and if it's been successful or?
equal outside, I'm not sure it's the chess one.
Yes. That's a Bible.
Right, but I'm not sure if they were, that's the only one I'm not 100% sure if they're primarily.
So is would Mike John's office?
But JA obviously is, only, I can't think of another one besides that may not be 50%.
Well, what about the, I don't know, that would be, you say anything that's school sponsored?
No, that's exactly.
Right.
I think what Mr. Kutzai is saying is very, very reasonable and big.
I mean, I guess we could have the superintendent make an exception,
Yeah, but then we can't, that's a slippery slope, we're gonna just say, oh, he can accept when he wants.
Really, it's always been all the other ones that I think are school sponsored, wrestling tournament,
Yeah.
the piano competition.
Right, if it's school sponsored,
Yeah,
then
but
there's no
the
question.
school sponsored event doesn't fall within this policy.
If it's a chess club, or if it's
Not
ham
the chess
radio,
club, it's
whatever,
chess
I'm just,
Saturday.
whatever it is, but. I like the whole 50% thing.
I think all the basketball, the men's groups are primarily, so it doesn't have that. Yeah, that's all right.
I've been to the, so I'm with you guys on the 50%, Mrs. Citron.
Who's
I would wanna-
actually diligencing the people before they walk in, hey, you're a Jericho resident?
Well, no,
They
anyone
have
can
to-
put down their 50%, it could end up being less.
Correct, but at least we have the right to track them if we realize that they're,
We could
someone's
request
taking
rosters.
advantage
And if
of
they're
us.
completely lying, then at least we'll have, if it's two people and
At
there's,
least we should have it in policy.
Correct.
Yes.
True.
I have another question about the user fee. We don't charge a user fee to use our facilities, do we?
We do.
Really?
Sometimes
Where is
depends.
there information about like charges and?
The only thing I'm aware of that we charge is custodial overtime when overtime is required. And things that happen during the week, we're here till 11, so it wouldn't be like an additional charge. It's more like things Saturday or Sunday. And even this building on Saturday, it's running pretty much all day anyway. But if anything requires additional custodial support, then we'll charge the group an hourly rate.
How do we work security for use of our facilities on days where we already have our staff there? Is that incumbent on the organization requesting to use our facilities, or
If they require security,
if they decide to, like, should there be security if people are
Yeah.
using our building or our facilities?
again, just trying to think, JA, there's no necessarily additional security that we would be expending monies on. And all the other major ones where we do have security, then it's still sponsored.
And just to clarify, the fees, it's applicable, so if there's no fee schedule, there's no fee schedule. But if there was a fee schedule, they would have to be willing to pay it.
We have traditionally, and other districts do this, we traditionally have not. Dance studios, private companies that are coming in and using the facilities. There I could see charging an actual rental fee. The ones that we have, again, JEA, it's just JEA, there's no other outside group that's
So
coming
we
in.
have the pool, we have the other schools that use our pool,
But we have agreements, contracts in place.
Yeah.
so that falls outside.
That's all.
Yeah, then we charge.
That's contractual.
That's a license agreement. So under education law 414, there's certain provision, certain ways, there's certain reasons that people can use property under this facility use policy. Anything that falls outside it, such that it would require a licensing agreement. So like your pool use, so someone using your pool, that falls outside of 414, that's why you get paid.
And then I guess the bus depot and the maintenance, that's.
Well, that we're partnering, doing intermunicipal agreements with
So
the other
that
districts.
falls under
That falls
that.
outside.
Yeah, that's all outside. That's not use of facility.
I just wanna make sure we're not,
Use of
I don't wanna look at
facility,
something that we're already doing.
this agreement solely for organizations such as the men's basketball league at night, intramural sports, or little league, stuff like that. That's what this is.
What about, I think a couple of years ago, they had 150 people came into the school to do some kind of
You talking the teachers,
The teachers, yes.
the teacher event that caused all the commotion?
At law.
And the change of the policy.
Well, that was actually, I think the change of the policy really was the Chuck Schumer event, but we could
Yes.
contribute that. But that's what I want to run through, a couple of examples like Mr. Jim is talking about. So, I mean, my understanding is we still do those types of events for teachers, which I was not aware until someone told me about that a couple of weeks ago. Do we still run teacher educational events, teacher education events where we have teachers from other districts come here?
Is this Jericho sponsored, or you're talking about it's an outside organization? Like, EdLo is not a Jericho organization.
Right.
They use it, it was different. The EdLo thing.
Yes.
At camp.
Ed camp
Yes,
outside.
by law, I.
We know what we're talking about.
Okay, no.
That doesn't,
Like I said, this is, I didn't bring it up until someone told me it was coming up. So those things under this policy, who would make that decision on ed camp?
No, it wouldn't qualify, just automatically.
I mean, again, the determination,
According to this,
Yeah.
if
why?
we pass this, because it's not a school sponsored, it's not a Jericho sponsored event.
well, if it's.
But if you have 30 Jericho teachers and 29 teachers from other districts, it becomes a Jericho 50% event. So who's making that decision?
Technically, the superintendent of schools is the person who makes the determination on the application.
Would he be able to turn that down if it's 50% or no?
How would he know though? At the time of the application, let's just say they really did.
I would have to, again, this
let me give you a real recent example. And it's
I don't know, I mean, that's what I'm asking, I have no clue.
Oh, yeah, is it resident? Oh, it's residents. Because it's not just Jericho teachers, that would, once again, he was saying, this is school property, taxpayers are paying for running the facility, there's resources. It's not Jericho teachers or Jericho employees would not qualify for that. It's
unless they're Jericho residents.
Jericho residents. Yeah, right, of course, if they overlap, but
I'll give you a couple of examples that I'm aware of. One, I think was happened at the beginning of this year. So custodial. So they have a facilities organization.
Just because I want to have this for posterity, can you
Yeah, sure. So they have a facilities organization, and each year they have the workshop, the annual workshop for custodians in a different district. So when I was here, we sponsored it, but there were other custodians from other districts that came to be a part of professional development for custodians. There was another, this hasn't happened in 2 or 3 years, but with transportation, they have a bus safety day where, again, it depends, like each year it'll change the district. This way, every district gets a chance to host it. But again, that's professional development for the transportation drivers.
So what's the answer? What's going to happen in those instances?
well, once again, it's.
I mean, that's something we've done, and I wouldn't want
The
to,
district's sponsoring that event.
Right.
Fall
Right.
outside of.
I wouldn't want
This
that
is for,
to.
this is for outside groups, not school district, not school district wanting to run events.
Okay, that's what, I'm just trying to
I just
clarify.
wanna make sure that we're not.
Of course, this is for outside groups.
Okay, so
I
let's
just want to make sure
go,
that doesn't get included in this.
so we'll go back to the real example. So State Assemblyman calls up and says, I want to have an event in your front circle talking about school safety,
Which happened 2 years ago.
something like that. Well, who's making the decision on that? And what's the requirement to allow that to happen?
Well, in the agreement, in this, again, depending on what the event's about, we added about the no political events.
Oh, but I agree, but then you get into the interpretation. Is it a political event or is it
No safety.
is it a real safety event? Who's making that decision? Yeah, but that was 50% residents. That was 50% residents, no, what I'm saying, so who's making that decision?
Ultimately, the application process is approved or denied by the superintendent.
Okay, so that, I understand the answer, so that's why I was trying to, so someone calls up and files an application, is there an application timeline in this?
We have it as, it's supposed to be 45 days before the event as practical. Obviously, things come up. Something might happen in which the event is scheduled 20 days ago, and that might not be able to follow in 45 days.
can we add language for those type of situations where the superintendent can make the decision, but the board can get involved if the board is against it or something?
I would have worded it differently.
Yeah, well, that's why we have a lawyer, that's why we have a lawyer, and.
I mean, if I'm not, isn't there
Yeah, but if it's short notice, we're talking about short notice, where it's like, oh, 8 AM, so-and-so's in town and they want to do this. I don't wanna get into the situation where everybody wants to have their picture taken with the prom queen, Jericho High School. And, you know, someone wants to announce something, they wanna come here and do it. And we're now having a process where we're selecting who's able to do it, who's not able to do it, because the politicians in town, they call up and just say, I'd like to do, make this announcement here next week, tomorrow. And it's like, okay, yes, and then the next guy calls up and it says, no, Dr. Kravitz, using his great discretion, would never do that, but we're trying to build policy for long term. How do we compensate for that? Let me ask you another hypothetical that I can understand.
I love it.
Someone's trying to open a new hotel in the neighborhood, and there's 100 community members who are against it. And they say, you know what? We can't find a safe place to have our rally. We want to have it in the front circle of Jericho High School. On a Saturday or Sunday morning, and I assume they're not even going to file an application. But if they're Jericho residents, do we have the ability to park buses in front of the entrance so you can't walk onto the property?
Yeah, I mean, we're thinking about this very specific.
Absolutely, because these are real world scenarios.
What I mean by that is, you're thinking about 50% residents, do I have to allow them? There's other things in this policy that these entities have to have that we're forgetting. There needs to be insurance, they need to sign the permit waiver, they need to hold harmless. There's a lot of other things that they might not be able to meet.
But Chuck Schumer didn't sign the hold harmless, he didn't sign an insurance policy.
But that event in particular, again, I'm trying to think of the best way to say it. It's not, again, he came to a press conference on your front lawn.
Yes.
In my opinion, yes.
Which is.
Well, no, in my opinion, he came to a political event on a front lawn. But yes, it can be called a press conference.
Again, we're still.
Why would Jericho residents, let's just say 50 Jericho residents need insurance if we're the actual taxpayers already paying for this building?
Because if they fall and get hurt on your property playing basketball in your gym, they're going to sue the Jericho School District.
But that could happen on a Tuesday afternoon.
You're absolutely right, but for the people who come onto your property at 9 p.m. at night to play basketball,
Yes.
and if they pull a hamstring and they want to sue the school district,
Yes.
the district should make sure that even though they're going to be sued anyway, because that always happens, that there's insurance indemnification that somebody else will ultimately have to be on the hook for that because we are letting them use our property. And by ours, I mean yours, because it's not mine.
I'll give you another example that happened. So
No, give it to Mr. Goodstead, he gave us an answer. I told him the answer.
If you may remember this, that the DEC came and did a presentation to very angry residents because of the plume of chemicals that was underneath the Caniac Park or something like that. And we had them we allowed them to come and do a presentation. Anyone was invited, it was primarily our residents, but there could have been plenty of other residents there as well. It wasn't important, it was a separate night. It's not a political event, it was to talk about the safety issue, it was informational. But that's another example that kind of, I feel like is somewhat outside of this.
I agree with you, but at least there wasn't a politician, there wasn't an elected official giving that presentation. That was the same way that, in my view, but I don't know what if the people who were building the huge electrical lines, and the name just escaped me, Propels went and said, you know what, I understand there's community concern about this, we'd like to come and give a presentation and invite the community, whoever wants to hear about how we're gonna be ripping up 107 and causing all these delays. And who's signing off on that? And if it's less than 45 days, because no one's planning these things 45 days in advance, what's the process under this policy? And who's making decisions for Propel?
You're, for the Propel, they're inviting people other than Jericho.
Yeah, but they're saying we're holding an event here. They have no idea who's gonna show up, but they're holding 10 across Nassau. And they're like, we expect most of the people who show up are gonna be Jericho people, but there's no way for them to know in advance. Even, there's no way to know.
That's the same example as the PUC.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. I'm covering, what do we do?
And again, that would probably be signed off by the school. Again,
Right, who's the school then, the board or the superintendent?
it's the superintendent. Again, the board doesn't have the ability to meet every 5 minutes to be able to approve these things.
Okay, but okay, and that's fine, and the question then becomes, say, Propel says, they're not gonna do it on 2 minutes notice. They're gonna say, you know, in 2 weeks, we want to do a town hall for Jericho. They obviously can't meet the 45-day requirement, so now we're into exception land.
Well, no, we put it as practical.
Okay, as practical,
So we
fine.
never.
2 weeks, superintendent now says, fine, we're gonna allow that to happen. And I'm not using Propel, so I wanna change it to whomever. Superintendent says yes. There are a majority of all of the board saying, we don't want to be involved in this. Can the board then go back and overrule what the super granted that permission? Can they do that on their own volition without anyone appealing to the board?
Well, you would have to convene a meeting and make a motion and make a formal motion, just like this.
Oh, no, go through the process, but they can do that on their own volition and say, we heard that so-and-so is having a meeting here, the superintendent's allowed them to use our property, we don't want to be involved with this. Board can say, we're having a special meeting, they give notice, they meet, they say, we do not want these people here, don't do it.
Can you? Sure.
Bless you.
Perfect. Political's open for interpretations. That was the problem. That was the problem, it is the problem.
Again, this is not, for posterity, I understand.
Yeah, we care about Mr. Van Wilber, but anyway.
I know. You know, this is a problem across Long Island. This is not a Jericho problem.
No, that's why I thought you'd have an easy answer for us.
There's never an easy answer because it's always at the eye of the person in charge.
Okay, perfect. At least we have answers and they're recorded. Anybody else on whatever we're at 3280? I'm gonna mix it up and go 5741 artificial intelligence. We can hear from Mr. Jim. I would say the easiest for last. So there's, everyone's seen the package, there are 2 current suggestions. Did BOCES have some policy in it that we all hated, or there was nothing in there about it?
Yes, I think Mr. Jin said it was, I'm gonna mince his words, so I apologize, it was awful. And that led him to create his.
Oh, so I have we have BOCES, we have yours, and we have his. Okay.
Correct, and I don't, again, I.
You know, his, but their BOCES, I have it in front of me, I'm sorry, I got confused for a second. 5840, so we have 3.
Yes, and my 5741 is really 5840, I don't know where that number came from.
Yeah, that was what was on it. Anyway, I guess the first question, how much of this, and this will then be to your policy, Mr. Jim, how much of this should be board policy versus how much of this should be company policy?
Yeah. I would tell you that you don't really want to hamstring yourself with regards to having you verify. And I know that's counterintuitive to most of the policies we have here, but AI in general, and as Mr. Jin I'm sure will agree with, is a very fluid process. It expands and changes on a daily basis. And AI platforms go all over the place. And for you to have to, every time something changes, for you to have to do a board first read and second read in order to change your policy to adopt the new AI tool that may or may not be used, it's a problem. But again, legally, of course, you can be very restrictive in the policy. There are just a couple of things I know with regards.
Before we get to that, Mr. Do you have a response to that? Do you have an opinion on what should be, you feel, board policy versus operating policy?
I think we can definitely, like how the teacher is using it, how the students using it, we can definitely put that in code of conduct, right? We can definitely move those out. I think the most importantly, I said in the email that the vendor would definitely need a policy for that, because data governance is very important for the school.
And I agree with that 100%.
Right.
And the thing is, with regards to data privacy and security, generally speaking, education law 2D is where your governance is. So policy notwithstanding, the law speaks for itself for what happens. FERPA is another thing, all contracts, so all vendors, and again, there's a difference between AI platforms that Jericho Union Free School District are using. That's their contracts.
Right.
And those contracts are going to have the provisions that that are concerned, data privacy, data security, FERPA, all those things, and those vendors are signing off. And most of these AI companies through BOCES have education law 2D contracts that are already completed. And they have been approved in which they have to comply. They've signed the Parent Bill of Rights and all those things.
I understand, but there's a difference with a policy, a software company say, I'm gonna comply with the FERPA law. And there's a difference between an AI company and I'm gonna comply with the FERPA law. So the AI, technically, if a company use your data, there's a different way to use it. The data can be sitting on the cloud, the data can be sitting on our server. There's two things that, if data is on our server, we control the data. This is in our server, we have total control. If data is on their server, they have control. Now, hold on, let me finish. When the data is on their server, that means that their server can get hacked. And you know what AI can do with the data? The hackers can use that data to manipulate and to use for different types of hackings. But for software companies, they can't do that. Software company says, I'm gonna apply, I'm not gonna leak anything out, and this is it. After we're done, we're gonna delete it. But AI, they can train on the data. So it stays with the model, learn with it.
Well, the first issue, and again, I agree with you, and I understand the concerns with the hacking and everything else. There was an article in Newsday recently about data privacy in schools. I completely agree. Just the thing I have to say regarding that is, with regards to these agreements that these AI companies have to sign in the event that they're going to do business, they need to provide a data security plan in which they are setting forth how their data is being stored, who has access to it, what has access, and also, people should not be putting in those personal data prompts into AI through Jericho. And again, that's the issue in and of itself. And to the extent that that is happening, that's more of an issue. And that's the policy that I drafted was more constrained to that, is to what really are the prompts that should be used. Again, I could put a prompt into AI that says, help me draft this book report on James Madison. And again, I hope no person's actually using AI to create a book report on James Madison, but whatever. But they're not putting in their name. They're not putting in the education, the personal identifiable information that's addition.
So here's the thing. I think the difference between AI that your understanding and my understanding is different. So what you're talking about is a student, someone using AI to chat and talking to the AI and putting the information. That's what you're referencing to. So I'm going to give you a second example. Power School, they're introducing some kind of an AI system called Power Buddy. So what it does is it collecting the intelligent data platform navigator school LMS. So that means Power School is going to connect with AI, and AI will have every single data in Power School. And they can do a lot with that data. Well, the good thing is, Power School, they have their own policies. They say that your data is yours. They will never train your data. They have those kind of policies in place. Whatever is yours, you want to delete it, you can do whatever you want with it. So that's good. That kind of vendor is considered low risk, right? Now, moving on to another company called Skillstruck.
That's because we're paying for that company and they have safeguards in place, like we're actually contracting with them.
Right. But then if you go to another company called Skillstruck, their policy is very vague. It's very vague. They're just saying, we comply with the FERPA, but they don't mention about what do they do with the data. They don't mention about, like, I'm not going to train you the data.
That would be an illegal contract.
Well, I don't know.
That's the point. So that would be that would not be in compliance with education law 2D.
Right.
They have to do those things. They need to say what their plan is, and the data privacy officer is supposed to review that plan in order to ensure that it does meet compliance. Again, this policy, the intent of this specific policy, is really regarding the instructional use of AI in the Jericho School District. That's what this policy is, the intent of. And so that's the reason why it's drafted, or at least the version that I drafted is written in that such a way. It's regarding use of AI in school district for educational purposes.
What I can tell you is, in terms of private companies, they have a much stricter contract requirement as well as policies for signing contract with AIs. And the way that our policy is written is too relaxed for school. That's what I can tell you. So if we go by the way that was written right now, I think we're gonna get lost in the future. That's my opinion.
Lawsuit
From people, like it could be anything, just like students, parents, or data leaking, or, I mean, you don't know. You don't
I don't
know.
think you're taking into account the FERPA and to.
I did, that's
but I don't
exactly
think-
what I meant.
But we can't enter into a contract with any of these companies unless they're compliant with that, so.
That's my whole point. We need to put in the policy that make sure that they comply with
Make
these.
sure that we're
But
not
they
entering.
know they sign contracts that say they're compliant with these things.
Okay, hold on.
But it's not in the
Go ahead,
policy.
Mr. Marina, you seem to always have good stuff on this.
It's state law. So the providers have to, in order to sell inside of a school district, you have to comply with state law. New York has some of the strictest laws.
Right.
In order to sell to Jericho or any other district AI systems, you have to adhere to the policies according to the law. The second set of this, which everyone's missing, is policy is irrelevant because that law exists. The configuration side is within the school's purview. So even if you buy the system, if you don't configure it correctly, it's on you. It's not on Google. It's not on OpenAI. It's not on Claude. So
That's what my policy is for.
but you can't policy the configuration aspects of it. That's a security posture that is within SOC 2, NIST 27001. Like it's compliance that's constantly changing. So there's yearly, quarterly assessments that ensure a district is secure from that posture, and those configurations are required by the district. So, Larkin, I believe?
Right here.
Sorry, Sam.
You believe correctly.
Mr. Larkin, Mr. Marina, Mr.
No,
Marina,
sorry. So he would ensure the systems are configured correctly to adhere to the requirements of the district to safeguard those things, which is, I think a couple meetings ago I asked, can we block OpenAI? Because we're not paying for OpenAI, but students on their Chromebook can access ChatGPT. So if you block that, you're preventing that free use of a system. The district can't be held liable for a kid using a free system in any way. That's like a kid saying, I'm on Instagram, but they're 12, but 13 is the threshold. Like, you can't sue Instagram for that, right? So the systems that the district purchases, whether it's Gemini, Claude, whatever, they just have to be configured correctly, and those are the only systems the kids should be able to use.
No, I agree. That's why there's a lot of, I don't know if you get a chance to read the policy, but some of the policy, the points I made was to having a due diligence in configuration as well. So, also, I think there's one of them. Let's see.
They'll be outdated by the time you guys approve it.
That's true.
And that's the problem, and that's the reason why the policy that I provided is, you call it relaxed, I call it more broad.
Mhm.
And the reason I call it more broad is because, again, the intention of this policy is to, what is the district's stance about the use of AI, generally speaking? It's that you will allow it, but again, under certain parameters. And again, this, actually, I think the most important thing here is really that people should not be putting in data points that are PII.
Mhm.
And that would prevent the issues involving the lawsuits and involving the data breach and involving all that. If we put in data points that are very history specific and not, I'm gonna use myself, for example, Steve Goodstaff specific, then there's gonna be no issue with the use of the AI, because even if it was stored and mined and whatever, it's not my PII, it's just my research, which is a different prompt. So again, I get your point, and to Mr. Rainey's point, the fact of the matter is, I've looked at all AI policies for the past couple of years, and every year, every district that's had an AI policy has had to change it substantially for the sole purpose that AI has changed. And even some of the things that are referenced in this policy regarding, that has these legal references, some of these legal references aren't even in effect anymore, just because of the fact that AI has changed. But again, I think it's one of those things that's more operational policy as opposed to board policy. Again, the board policy should be big picture. Does the school district allow AI purposes? Again, with regards to Ed Law 2D, with regards to FERC, with regards to legal obligations, in order for us to use a Claude or a Gemini or a paid AI program, there has to be a contract with the Ed Law 2D requirements, which includes how is data stored? Is it complying with NIST 1.1, which for now is still in effect as of September 1? It's going to be NIST 2.0. How is it stored? How is it? Who has it at rest? Who has access to the platform? All of those things have to already be covered. So,
That's fair. I think at the very least, we should have a policy on how the teacher using AI to grade the students.
that's a different issue, and that's
Dr. Hartnett, are your people using AI to grade students?
Not that I know of, but I have 330 members, so I can't account for all of them. I would find that it just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I think I heard some students run an essay through what AI will say about it. And one of the things that when I've seen those examples are so absurdly thorough that it takes the human element out of it. So that's all I know at this point. Would I see a teacher saying, okay, I have a bank of multiple choice questions and therefore I'm looking to change around some of those multiple choice questions so I can get, for example, to prevent cheating from period 3 to 7, to work in a different, to use the same material over again. That's really the examples that I've encountered.
Dr. Sundberg, you'd have a category, you'd have a subject area where there would be a lot of interpretive essays that they might use AI to judge. Anything you've heard from your people?
I'm not aware of anybody at this point using AI to grade student writing. There are a number of tools that might have AI as part of their construction that might generate questions for students to take that are more short answer or multiple choice, and it might be a vendor that we use. You would probably know more about them, but they're used for homework, for students to get feedback, and maybe they're designed to make questions get progressively harder or easier depending on how the student is doing. They're learning tools. Whether or not anything from that becomes part of a grade, it's a whole other philosophical question. These sorts of things are coming. I think there's a difference to say you're using AI to generate questions, as Dr. Hartnett is saying, or to score short answer or multiple choice items than there is to interpret an essay.
Who's our AI committee right now? Mr. Larkin, do we have a formal AI committee?
Tech
we have
committee.
a formal AI committee, right?
Tech committee, but it encompasses AI as well.
Mr. Jin, are you on that committee?
Is anyone using in the district, not to grade, but to determine a student has turned in AI work?
Yes.
Yes.
That to me is problematic.
it depends. Is it, when they're making a determination as to whether it's AI work, is it deaggregated? That's where the issue arises. Is the name, is it attached to something? So is it a paper that says Steve Goodstadt and that's being submitted? Because then that becomes potentially a FERPA.
Well, we have a contract, I thought, for Turnitin or something like that, which I assume would have to, if what you're saying is true about contracts,
Again,
it would have to be under FERPA,
and if
whatever.
that's the case, then that's okay.
But the consistency of those tools is my biggest problem. And I don't think you could policy this, but I think it's something worth understanding. They're notoriously false flagging content as not original, including Gettysburg Address and many other things that are popular right now online you can search. And these tools that supposedly detect AI writing are taking some of history's greatest literary works and saying it's AI, which everyone knows is impossible. Our kids could potentially be false flagged for using AI when they didn't. And that to me is, whether you're grading it or not, or you're flagging it, is problematic for the district.
You're correct.
We all agree with that.
And so you use the word understanding is more important than policy. You're also correct in that. So situational awareness. There are some situations where we have no choice. So turning in things for College Board, for example, in our AP research class, we're required to run it through certain tools, and we have gotten in conversations and resolved things sometimes, but there's no policy answer to
I just want to give us.
It's enough to say that if something gets flagged, it's not just an automatic, you throw it out. There's a qualitative process that then.
Most definitely, and really we use it as informational, that we have students as a result, AP seminar, for example, the College Board wants every student to run their research paper through, turn it in. And turn it in not only will tell you whether they think some of it's plagiarized or used in certain ways, but also will give an AI analysis of it too. And we're well aware, because we watch students write these, and then we hear that it's AI, like, it goes back to what Dr. Sundberg was talking about, that we're using this as information. We're saying, this is what it's saying to you about your paper. You know, let's talk about whether there really are any issues. For example, with Turnitin, if you leave your works cited in there, all of a sudden the percentage of what you supposedly plagiarized goes through the roof because they think of all that as being plagiarized because it's already reappearing material. So there's all of these things that are problems with it. We use it only to tell the students, okay, what was your score, and let's see if there's any concerns with it. It's not, and again, we watch them do it. It doesn't affect their grade at all. We're required by the College Board to do it. So we do it, but we only use it to, foster discussion. And usually when it comes to plagiarizing, none of it's plagiarized because you're using sources, but it kind of tells students that you're leaning too much into not using your own writing and instead overly quoting or something to that effect, or not paraphrasing. So it becomes an informational tool, but not something that ever hurts the students. I think that's very important to get across.
It should be a teaching tool. Anytime you're using this gear to be police and to catch cheaters, you're using it wrong. You should be using it for instruction. And even before it was an AI tool, the old Turnitin, it was that way too.
I think in that case, we should put a policy that you should be using AI to grade, because I seen teachers grading with the essay
in sixth grade.
In sixth grade.
How do you know they're? Again, I'm not looking for anything. How do you know they're grading with AI?
Because I double checked cross reference, and I literally got an AI response for that essay.
I'm sorry, I know I'm as dumb as it comes. What do you mean you gotta?
From brisk teaching, like you could because I have access to brisk teaching, and what it does is you put your essay into the AI, and you kind of go through like, oh, how's the writing, the pronunciation, the grammar, everything, and it gives you a score, and literally copy and paste, and just show, oh, this is your score.
And you've seen that from a teacher.
And I got it. Yeah, exactly.
I would recommend you share that information with the lady at the end of the table, Dr. Sherman. But I think, as of today, and the problem I have with that is, in a year, everybody might be AI. That's the whole thing. I don't know.
That's the problem. Like, I'm okay if you use it to check the spelling, the grammar, and everything, but the teacher needs to read the whole essay.
Oh, look, I think the teacher will read the essay, but I think the teacher running it through to get.
Exactly. They're just like, oh, I'm not gonna read through 25 students' essay. I'm gonna let that AI run through and I'm gonna grade it. Whatever AI gives to me, I'm gonna grade it. Well, you don't know.
That should not be happening.
It should not be happening.
So it's not so much, so it's really, you don't want that to be the sole, right, the sole mechanism to judge a student's work should not be AI.
Exactly.
I can get comfortable with that. Not telling them they can't use AI to grade stuff.
No.
I don't want to
know it. I'm saying like, they can use AI to do spell check, grammar, and everything, but they cannot use what AI is telling. AI say, oh, is a B or B plus or A plus, and then you say, okay, AI tell me it's A plus, I'm gonna get.
No, we agree. I think everybody, even the trial that's like, we agree with that. Yes,
that's what I meant.
Okay, good. And I think, and Dr. Hartnett is speaking for his 330 members shaking his head up. Mr. Goodside, can we add something like that into your thing? your eloquently written AI policy.
I knew what you meant by it.
Yes. I just have one comment. Under student use, it says the school district permits teachers to determine whether students in the class may use AI for assignments. I didn't think that was consistent with what we were doing, that we just that each individual teacher gets to tell their class that they can use AI for whatever they're doing. I thought that we were telling students they can't use AI.
Can't or
Cannot use it to write an essay or to.
Mike and I and Jana actually have been discussing a lot about guidelines and what kids can do, and we're talking about using something called like a stopgap kind of a thing, where a student, like a teacher would post let's say a red sign, which means absolutely no AI. Green, maybe you're allowed to use AI to assist with this. We haven't gotten there yet, but these are some of the discussions we're having. But certainly, there are certain places where it is appropriate.
Yes, so going along with like the whole, AI literacy piece and using, a lot of these tools for grading. It's not really for grading. It's using these tools to help start the conversation around the process of learning, right? So essays don't get written in one draft, right? And a lot of these tools, what they do is they actually provide you the ability to kind of assess each draft and look back at, was this a copy and pasted essay? I know I'm digressing a little bit, but just to kind of address some of the stuff that was said before. They let you assess how the process of that essay was written. And some of these tools will say, oh, it was like AI written. And we all know, like with Sam and Mike, they're not always correct, right? But, as far as letting students use AI, we're looking at, the possibility of using like an AI disclosure form so that teachers require, like if you did use AI, how did you use it? What level, like what step did you use it at? Like level 0, I didn't use AI at all. Level 1, we used it for brainstorming, or level 2 for creativeness. Level 3, level 3, I used it as a thought partner.
What I'm thinking about is like I've had teachers tell me, as you're saying now that there are uses for AI. I've been in meetings where teachers have said, no, students should not be using AI to write their paper, where forget about spell check and forget what the program is that corrects your grammar.
Like Grammarly?
Grammarly, yeah, I should have remembered that when I said it's a long day. I've had teachers say unequivocally, no, my students should not be using Grammarly. And the problem I then come to is, if in 6th grade the teacher's like, yeah, Grammarly's fine, it's gonna help you with your sentence construction, it's gonna help you this, and then get to 7th grade, the teacher's like, no, you can't use that. They've now just lost a year to some extent of education, because they haven't learned some of the basics, because as everybody in 10 years will be doing, they've leaned on the technology, and now they're coming back and now the teacher's saying, no, sorry, your 6th grade teacher screwed you over because they let you use that crutch, and now you're not ready for my 7th grade class. So I'm trying to understand how you don't disadvantage certain students in that case.
They're using it in 4th grade though. Like I think it's part of curriculum.
Oh no, I know they are, but that's what I'm trying to understand how you do it, because I said there are teachers that have unequivocally said Grammarly is cheating.
Well, because Grammarly has an AI detection tool that uses AI to un-AI your work. It's such a backwards system.
We don't have a license for Grammarly,
Yeah.
so that's not that's not an app that we would recommend.
No, but these kids are going home and writing essays at home, they can download Grammarly. I mean, the high school kids can have their own computers, they can download Grammarly or buy Grammarly or whatever you do with it, and use it that way. So I know there's no straight answer, there's no easy answer. I'm just trying to understand what we're telling students from class to class.
The most common examples I've heard are prompts for prompts. For example, students are writing research papers and they want to write a research paper about the United States military. And then they may ask AI, can you give me 20 topics on this so I can start figuring out what are the topics I would like to research to figure out which paper I could lean to. In other words, it's what Mike was talking about before of the brainstorming, and where students might not have the type of background And teachers will throw that out too. It's very similar where I might give them 25 topics on something. AI may give them 25 other topics to allow them for points of exploration. That seems, at least in my discussions with other teachers, the most common places are to get other ideas, to keep drawing on other ideas, to get the process started. Like I said, we were talking about technology. A lot of these problems are taken care of at times by the fact that, the last 7 essays I've done are handwritten. Yes, you can scan them, but that would take a lot of work with handwriting and everything. But I want to make clear part of the problem that has to go on as I'm doing this kind of work. Meanwhile, right now, AP students are writing in Blue Book, which is an online approach. So by doing everything there's a lot of work. All the AP and College Board at this point demands you to be on a computer. So as we're trying to disengage from computers at certain points, eventually I have a responsibility to put them on the computer to get them ready for test prep. So I know that's a little tangent on a tangent, but as these are gonna keep coming up.
If Mr. Jim, Mr. Goodstad, and even Mr. Bahraini are all in agreement that this policy works, I fully can't argue.
I could add the concern about the teachers grading in the section entitled School District Personnel Use of AI.
And can we just put in here something, I don't know, maybe it's probably that, but individual teachers will make it explicitly clear in writing to students, and probably something that you go home to parents saying, this is my AI policy in my class for this year.
It's in the policy. So it says if students are permitted to use AI to complete assignments, the use of AI would be clearly communicated by the teacher.
It clearly communicated is sort of my issue. Clearly communicated in writing, can we share this in writing? Thank you.
When we're talking about compliance, when we say applicable laws, are we talking about federal laws, state laws, just all laws?
All laws.
Okay.
Mr. Jen, anything else?
I think we should also include, I don't know if that should be a policy or conduct, the parents and community should be aware of the against compliance. Every year, like what each parents were using every year. Because it moves so fast, like every year we might get a new app, new program.
Page on the website?
One link on the website.
Ms. Melito, page on the website. Thank you.
It already exists.
Yeah, yes.
But to keep it up, just.
It is.
I think that's amazing.
Okay.
They put it
What's
all.
amazing?
Yep.
What's amazing? I heard it's amazing.
No, Mr. Larkin has amazing.
Mr.
AI
Larkin, you are amazing,
resource
I'm told.
page,
Wonderful.
A great resource AI page, she does.
One more thing.
Thank you.
What is that called?
I think a lot of AI companies, they have a policy that only, I think it's like 13 or 14 years old, they're not allowed to use AI. How are we managing that?
Great question.
Because I know Claude, they restrict 18 under, like if you're under 18, they ban your account, they don't let you use it.
Really?
Yeah.
Not my kids. Oh my kids.
Obviously, my daughter was using my account got banned.
How?
She was typing like the way she was.
What was she doing?
She was creating a website for like teaching elementary school or kindergarten, like that kind of class, and she was recording herself. And when she recorded herself, they obviously detected it. And then she was like, and then they say, or this is not for anyone under 18, so they banned my account.
Wow.
I had to appeal and to prove it that was me. It was like my account, I'm an adult, so that happened to me.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying like how.
Again, the policy is directed that no student should be disadvantaged by their inability to use or decision not to use AI.
Right, but I'm just saying like.
I think that
But you said applicable law.
it's applicable law, so
Right.
I mean, I can't control if Claude is not going to allow your daughter to hack your account. I'm kidding.
No, I'm talking about school. I'm talking about school.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
I think I would assume that the school would have the ability to create to be able to run a platform that allows us.
So for example, let's say the school using Gemini, right? And that's Google AI. And the students they use Chromebook, and Chromebook has access to Gemini. And Gemini, the policy is like, I don't know their policy, but I'm just looking up. Let's say the policy is 14 years old and you're not allowed to use AI. And obviously the student in school is using it, and parents say, why are you guys letting my son is using that? Because according to the policy, you can't use it. And they're gonna sue the school.
They're not.
This is
I'm
what-
just making things up. Like, stop making them up. Anything can happen.
No.
But the school's already, just so, the elementary students are already using Gemini,
Right.
which is procured.
That's my concern.
Again, these are systems that you guys are contracting with. And the solution is close the non-contracted systems and block those out. That's we're like focused on the ones that you're purchasing, and it should be block the ones you don't purchase, because you can literally go, a 5-year-old can go right now on chatgpt.com, OpenAI, and type a question and get an answer. It doesn't do age verification, it doesn't do age restriction, it has none of that. So the problem within the school is simple. The tools you permit are permitted, the tools you don't permit are blocked. And that solves all the things. You don't need a policy. You just
Yeah,
need
I'm
a-
not, to Mr. Bernie's point, I'm not concerned about what he's contracted with. It's everything else.
And in high school, the device concept, just full disclosure, my 2 high school students use AI. They use Claude, they use OpenAI, and you're not gonna stop them. And the reality is, it's the curriculum that the teachers are teaching on AI literacy and how to use AI is what's relevant, not policy and anything else. Because the kids it's like saying you need 8 hours of sleep. The kids are up till 2 in the morning. You can do whatever you want. You're not gonna stop the usage of AI. It's how the students are using it in the curriculum.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess my question is like, if we're using Google Workspace, right, which is access to the whole Google Suite, and Gemini, I imagine, is a part of that, that's how they would access it. So I like the idea, I mean, in the hospital system, we also connect to log into ChatGPT, OpenAI, we have an AI hub that has all of this behind a firewall, similar to, I imagine, what the Google Workspace is. So I like the idea of shutting down at least Chromebook access to some of the other sites. It doesn't, doesn't change what happens on your home device, that's up to parents. But even with the workspace, if they're accessing Google at an age younger than 13, my understanding was that because of the generative nature of AI, there should still be some parental consent. I don't know if that's true or not. And if, as a parent, we sign off on the use of technology, et cetera, in the schools, I mean, which is part of what we're using all the time, if that should be included. I don't know if there's a law about that, but that was my understanding, because this comes up honestly on the healthcare side of pediatrics. And so it's something that we discussed from that standpoint, and I don't see why it would be very different from an education standpoint in this setting. So if we could just find out about that, but I did think that there was something with AI and the age of 13, which was mentioned by other people.
But I keep hearing that everybody's just evading these rules anyway, so.
No, I'm not, I think.
But just to protect ourselves.
Yeah, I think that if there's something there,
So
we have families sign consent for tuition and stuff. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't.
No.
We do monitor and block, so we use GoGuardian, right? So GoGuardian monitors our website traffic and content. There's automatic filters for like AI tools that we turn on, like they've been creating additional filters in GoGuardian to block extraneous websites that we don't approve, right? Kids are really good at finding things that we don't block, but we do monitor the GoGuardian traffic on a daily basis. I do have somebody on my staff that does that, and we do add to the block list as we go. That includes gaming sites. It includes sites that kids build for games and AI tools, as well as other AI sites that are out there that we are able to find, see that students are using. We do try to block as many as possible. The ones that we allow, like Google, we do have a contract, like an agreement.
I didn't know if there's a way, there's no way to control it on the MacBooks that some of the high schoolers are using.
So that's one of the I guess it's like one of those double-edged swords, right? We want our children to have like the best devices possible, but at the same time, when they're bringing their own devices, it makes it a lot harder for us to manage them centrally. So it's not good on the distraction and content side of things when you bring your own device for teachers and students in the classroom, but it's also not good on the network security side, right? Because we're unable to put the proper cybersecurity software in place to prevent like breaches, hacks, viruses, things like that. So it's something that we do have to consider, you know, in the future. But we do monitor the network, we monitor traffic, and we look at various ways that we can improve, you know, blocking things that shouldn't be used.
The Google Workspace, just to answer her question and everyone, again, the tool you're paying for in the district has Workspace Admin Panel, which enables the district to, first of all, there's a youth experience under 18 for Google Gemini, and there's restrictions and content filtering that the district can set within the workspace to further restrict usage of it. So it's not you're not getting this whole open to the world system. You're getting a youth experience under, I think, whatever the age number is. But everybody can use Gemini from newborn to however old you want.
Okay, we have beaten this like a dog. So I think we're going to go back to.
Just as an aside, there's AI, the question about am I under the age of 13? And there is, it's a supervised Google account. So there are mechanisms. And again, if the school district, if it's through the school district's Google account, it is supervised. It's supervised through the school district.
Yes.
To go along with Christopher.
And we monitor that, and we've set it up, you know, we've set it up appropriately, and we could also change it if the board, you know, wants to make changes to our settings.
So I think we're at the point where we have a new 5741 that follows closely Mr. Goodstad with a couple of additions related to, what were the two additions again?
Teachers can't use AI to grade
Solely.
papers.
Can't solely use it, yes.
And then also that communication needs to
Fairly
be
communicative writing. And the blank on student use, I would assume that you want it to be the assistant sup for curriculum is the person that does the approval.
I think we also need to add a wording that if the teacher used AI to grade in any kind of form, they need to state it. Like, they need to say, oh, I use it for grammar and stuff like that, but everything else, I think they should say that.
For transparency.
For transparency.
Or we just assume that they're all using it at this point.
We're so far in the weeds.
Probably everyone's.
One more weed is, what we're gonna do is, that's gonna go into operating procedure. Okay, so we're gonna, whoever's doing the operating procedure is gonna take a lot of Mr. Jim's document and move that into operating procedure. And I still suggest you get on that AI committee, or technically, can we make an AI subcommittee?
We used to have one.
Yeah, we had one.
Well,
But Mr. Larkin said we
when I
don't.
started, I went through the list of the tech committee and the AI committee, and they were generally, it was like the same group, so we put it together.
Cool, great. So we've got a 5741, which leaves us for tonight only with 3430. Opportunity for all, I'll be presumptuous. In the packet, there was a redrafted version of, we have two sort of policies in there. One, we have the existing policy, which was created a few years ago, I don't remember the exact year, that was adopted in reference to a whole bunch of stuff going on in the world. As we talked about last time, some of that had become outdated. I took a shot at writing something new, so you know where I stand. The draft that is in the document is missing two additional phrases that were added, or two additional numbers, two additional line items that were added in response to feedback that I got from any number of people. Those two pieces are: the district will continue to support a learning environment that incorporates the plights and perspectives of the historically marginalized and disenfranchised. And no, and then it was: the district will continue to identify and eliminate barriers that might prevent any individual or individuals from participating in the learning process. Number 8 was there in the draft.
The one we're looking at, it says second revised 3430, right?
Yes, I sent around a new one yesterday or today.
I think that's what I have open, but.
Number,
Those things are in there.
Yeah, those things are not in there.
did I send the wrong one to you people?
I think you did,
No,
yeah.
the one that we sent today has 9 and 10.
No, but where did whatever you just read off is on there.
You know, 3 and 8 were the 3 and 7 were the two.
The barriers one you added,
Yes.
On the historically marginalized, you added.
Yes, those were in response to feedback that I got from very intelligent people or persons.
Oh, yes, 3. And.
7.
Yes.
Yes, correct, okay. Sorry, you were referring to different
I
numbers,
apologize.
so I thought.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did. So yes, so there's now 10 pieces where there was previously 8. And as I said, I tried to work in all the major points that were in the old policy, but without the politically charged language or tone that would make it or makes it unattractive to people, to try to get people in. I know you do, Mrs. Wartnoff. I don't know how others feel. So, anyone have any other comments, whether at this dais or amongst the various crowd out there?
Questions, concerns?
I'd just like to thank you for trying, being responsive to our concerns. I appreciate that.
You are very welcome.
And I want to agree that I appreciate you addressing most of the comments that were given and incorporating more of the feeling of the older policy. I guess I'm just concerned we got rid of having a DEI committee and I think it's still important to have an opportunity for all committees, if we want to just call it that, as a name. And I guess I'm just concerned, I just want to make sure that the message that the board is sending by having this much condensed policy is not that we're not as open and as committed to the concept that was agreed upon and adopted a few years ago. So I just want to make sure that, everyone in the community knows that this is still an important priority for the board, even though the policy is much more condensed. And I'd like to request that we add the concept of having a committee.
I don't have an issue with the committee. I don't think it needs to be a board mandated committee. The superintendent has the ability, if he thinks there's an issue or an issue that needs to be addressed, he's able to put together whatever committee he would want. I don't think it needs to be a mandated concept from the standpoint of the various rules that would come along with that.
I
understand.
the message that we're sending and the importance of it. So while it doesn't have to be mandated, I just, by taking away the committee, I don't want to be sending the community a message that this is not important.
I don't think anyone would say it's not important.
Or that their input doesn't matter.
That was the benefit of the committee, was
Of
to
course,
gain
that's where we have
community
stakeholder input and can, discuss, or identify concerns that are relevant to all.
I think that is a much bigger question. As you know, I've pushed it for the last 5 years that this district should be doing more, getting more feedback from community members, whether it be students, parents, or faculty. In the past, I was always met with resistance to that. So I'm not sure why everyone suddenly thinks this is the only area where we should be getting feedback. So in terms of getting feedback and taking temperatures, I think we heard that tonight with the presentation, that's going to be one of the goals of that. But the same way, we're not taking in here saying that we're trying to take temperature in all these different areas, because I believe everyone, for the most part, agreed that right now a lot of the issues that are outlined in this policy are not issues that we think are serious problems in Jericho. That doesn't mean they won't become serious problems in Jericho tomorrow or 2 years from now. But
and they're not, even if they're not problems in Jericho, it's to teach the students when they go out into the world that isn't as insulated as Jericho, how to live in a world that has all these issues. So we're not.
But I don't see what does that to do with the policy? That's what I
Because that's part of the DEI committee was to, teach the kids how to live in a world that has all of these.
But the committee wasn't having direct interaction with the students.
Well, there were students on the committee, and the committee was taking climate surveys and then coming up with So the data and then they would come up, teach students,
I think there's,
that,
soon there will be survey fatigue in the school.
I don't
We make surveys, that's the problem. Hold on, Mr. Barani, go ahead.
So I appreciate the trustees having concern about the committee. It's a really fair point, actually, which kind of, regardless of this policy question, I don't feel committees are representative of the community, and there's never an open call for parents to join committees unless they belong to a certain 501c3 in this community, and there isn't public transparency as to who is on committees. So I do appreciate the trustees' concern over the committee, and it's a very good comment.
The only thing I'll say to that is, if we go back and watch the video, when we were forming the committee for DEI, and I'm probably arguing against my own case, there was a very restricted group who was listed on that, and it didn't even include going out to the public to take applications. This was one of the only committees, at my urging, that we ended up taking public applications for it because it was so insulated, and because it was so insular. So I take your point with other committees, but is it Dr. or Mrs.? I don't remember. Dr. who was a member of that committee, there was public solicitation for that committee. That being said, I don't believe it needs to be a board mandated committee. I think there's many different ways, different people, and different procedures that go on to taking that temperature. I think those types of things are integral to what we do, and I'm not sure that there needs to be a board I don't believe there needs to be a board mandated committee, but I think we are committed to all these things. I think that's why, as Dr. Hunter said, people said, well, we're missing this, we're missing that. We got all that in here. I fully recognize the tone of this policy is a little bit different than what we had there previously, but I don't think that, in my view, diminishes, thank you, Dr.
I think that makes, I appreciate the point about the committee, that was actually gonna be one of my questions too. I agree that there does not need to be board mandated committees for everything that we're thinking about, but even if we just look at the goals that were outlined by the group here, inclusion and belonging was a big part of, I think, goal 1 or goal 2. And so, it was goal number 1. And so, as you think about alignment, but belonging and, I mean, they're all part of the same spectrum of safety and inclusion, right? I mean, I think we can all respect that well-being comes from a sense of inclusion, that comes from a sense of fostering belonging. So I do think there's a benefit of having a diverse stakeholder that's looking specifically at inclusion and belonging, not just from a mental health or well-being standpoint, but also from like including diverse perspectives and curricula. I remember being in this room, having one of the first meetings and thinking about all the different ways that we celebrate the various heritage months. Right now it's May, it's Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and we talked a little bit about the content that we had in our community that's rich with a lot of Asian perspectives. And the Jewish Heritage Month, May, exactly. So I mean, I think it's really helpful to have people thinking about it from this perspective with diverse backgrounds. Because we all are addressing it in technology and weapon and well-being community, I imagine, the nutrition, right? There's different ways to look at it, but I do think there's a loss if the board is still committed to that, the concept of really uplifting all voices and having diverse perspectives, there's a loss when you're saying, well, we won't mandate or we won't really give the platform for such a committee to say. And again, I'm not sure how other non-board mandated committees maintain their consistency being, a robust sort of committee, but I think that is a loss that I took from.
How many times did the DEI committee meet? Like 2-3 times a year?
I think it was close to half a dozen times a year. We're not meeting now, there's reasons we can unpack on that. But
no unpacking tonight.
No unpacking tonight, so.
I do have a question, and I'm gonna just ask it of people who are more deeply involved in this work and also people who are involved in the community, especially as it pertains to education. We have Sam is in his policies, rather than using the word equity, has listed equal access as an alternative, and I don't know that this policy, without using the word equity, actually delivers the point that equal access does not mean equity, and that just because somebody has equal access to opportunities doesn't mean that they're going to be able to make use of them. So I'm just wondering if that needs to be further developed in this policy.
That there's a reason that equity was taken out.
I understand, but I
Can
think that
you
that's.
say what that reason is?
It has a different meaning.
I'll absolutely tell you why. I mean, this is,
The word means something
But
different.
without using the word, how do you, without using the word, how do we?
Because equal means like I get a laptop, you get a laptop, everyone gets a laptop. Equity means.
But what if
What
you're
if someone-
blind?
What?
Exactly.
What if you're blind? You need a different laptop?
But that's covered by the laws. I mean, there's laws for disabilities. That has nothing to do with.
here's my problem, just very simply. There's something online, and again, not AI, but it's, I gotta get from the University of British Columbia, they have an equity and inclusion glossary of terms. And they have lots and lots and lots of terms. And as I talked about last time, there's lots of different definitions for equity. But here's the problem I have with it. Equity refers to achieving parity in policy, process, and outcomes for historically, persistently, or systematically marginalized people and groups. My problem is when you talk about parity of outcomes. I have no problem with parity of health, parity of things, but when you talk about parity of outcomes, I don't understand how that is something that we should look for. And that's my hurdle. So get me around that hurdle, and I'm there with it.
The word is defined in the existing DEI policy. How is it defined there?
It's not,
No, the one that still exists at this moment.
Yeah. Equity includes but is not limited to seeking the fair treatment, access, opportunity for all while striving to identify and eliminate barriers that have prevented the full participation of all groups. So I've given you that definition of equal access and opportunity and identifying and eliminating barriers without using the word where others will interpret that differently. So again, I'm not sure what the point of using the word is. If you can get the concept across without using a word that some may find ambiguous or read more into it than it is, what have you lost?
I think the question is equal access the same as what we just mentioned? I think many folks would argue that equal access doesn't give you the equal opportunity. I mean, another term could be meaningful access, right? I mean, there's many different ways you can slice this, but equal access in general means that you get the same resource for every person. That's what equal means. It means the same. And that doesn't always allow them to get that ability for access and opportunity. So,
But it says all students have equal access to educational opportunities. If you want me to change the order of the words, we can talk about that. But I don't understand. I'm trying to understand what we're missing. And so, like I said, as Dr. Summer said, what's the definition of equity here? It's in there. The exact words that we used in there for equity are in there. And my concern is when you use the word equity, you're talking about parity of outcomes.
but that's defined clearly. That's one definition. What was in the document, that's right, that wasn't mentioned at all. Equity we recognize is a very charged term in today's socio-political climate. I get that, and I do think it's very prudent to be careful about how we use these terms in our board policies. I think that's helpful, and I love the movement towards focusing on access, which I think is really important in fair treatment. But I do think that the term equal access is not representative of everything we were discussing. So I would just ask that maybe we think of a way to frame it exactly as we've been saying. I think this conversation shows that there's more depth than the term that I heard. And I apologize, I looked at the policy earlier, but
I'm still trying to understand what is the
Appropriate access. It's
appropriate
access. It does.
you want appropriate access? That's fine. I don't, not to ensure that all students have appropriate access to educational opportunities. Okay, what does that mean?
Does that include club creation?
What?
Legit question.
Today, no, but it should.
No, it's a legitimate question.
It's an absolute, does it include club creation? Our principal's already here to answer the
Yeah,
question.
I mean,
Mr. Mendonis is here, he's rubbing his eyes. What I'm saying, explain to what appropriate means.
appropriate means.
No, but they just need appropriate access and equal access. What's the difference in meaning?
You're giving a student what they need. So students have different needs, so they don't have equal needs.
And it's not in any way, suggestive of the outcome, it's just their ability to make use of what's given to them to be able to access the opportunities, but not necessarily saying the outcome is going to be the same, to give them what they need to, so that the outcome is the same for everyone, it's so that they can make use of the opportunities that are.
Even our motto
But
is
then-
See, the problem is with me, and again, when I hear appropriate as I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking separate but equal.
No.
Like, but I
Well,
know, I know that's not what you mean, but I'm thinking, what does that mean? Appropriate access, you now have.
Meaning it's gonna look different for every
Could
kid.
appropriate be interpreted as one kid gets more than the other? Then that's not equal, and then that's already,
It may not
you're
be
leading
more.
in towards, dangerous territory, because now you're giving one kid more than the other.
I don't
Because it's
see
more
it as more,
appropriate.
I see it as different and child specific.
I get that.
It's what the child needs. We're giving each child what they need, and that's what we do here. That's what we've always done here, and we always should continue to do that.
But there again, that's when you start the district will continue to identify and eliminate barriers that might prevent any individual from participating in the learning process. That's giving everybody the appropriate access. That's what I'm trying to understand. There's lots of, there's sort of two parts to this where it's like, okay, you want to give every kid what they need, and we are in agreement on that. But I think when you start getting into appropriate, you start to become saying what makes it appropriate. Appropriate then becomes, well, everybody should be able to score 95 on this test. Okay? And there are different things that different needs. Like someone talked about, if it was a blind kid or something like that, yeah, that's different. I fully understand that process, but the point of the matter is, like, when you say appropriate for what? Appropriate so that everybody can get an A in the class? But that's what.
Outcome, it's just appropriate, with regards to access and opportunity.
To take advantage of the opportunities that we.
But that's what literally what this policy says,
Right,
literally.
but that's,
It says
equal is not what we do.
Equal is not what we're talking about.
But other policies govern what you're talking about, that's not DEI. So there's state test requirements, there's ESL requirements, there's like extra time requirements, there's all these different things that our kids get, including my kids.
Kids with disabilities.
Right, that Americans with Disabilities Act and all these other things that are not governed by DEI. The other laws and thresholds within the state education system govern all those little things you're talking about.
So why do you, maybe there's a better word than appropriate. I mean, the teacher suggested meaningful, I don't know.
I think even meaningful and equal access could be helpful. I just think that the term equal access is not representing clearly what this conversation has shown. I think just acknowledging that equal doesn't mean the same exact thing. I think meaningful is helpful to me because it's not only that you're providing it, but it's accessible to the individual, right? Like, I mean,
if you put meaningful in there though, I
It's a beautiful word, but it's an aspirational word, and it's, you can't,
Can I say that just so we're clear, this is talking about we'll have equal access to educational opportunities regardless of all the things that you then see, sex, race, color, ethnicity, nationality, religion. If you want to put physical handicap, so I'm saying, we're having an argument about something that this paragraph isn't focused on. We're putting it in there that's saying, regardless of, whatever problem you have, you're getting equal access to the opportunity, which means, in my interpretation, that you are going to be able to participate in that process, in the you're not going to be denied an opportunity. And remember, this policy was meant to talk about, it wasn't meant to talk about the blind kid who didn't have it. That's not where the genesis of this policy came from 5 years ago. It was completely in another direction. And as others have pointed out, as Mr. Raines pointed out, all those things you're talking about, blind kids is covered by other policies.
That was just an example, and clearly that is covered under disabilities and whatnot. I'm talking about some of these other things that are here, that are not covered necessarily under 504s or IEPs and whatnot.
But that's not what this policy was meant to cover.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm trying not to advocate for a position, I'm just trying to clear.
But we know what position you're advocating for, so just advocate for it. It's okay.
Well, I guess what I want want to think about when we're thinking about the word equity and what was originally intended to do and what maybe the board is deciding not to do anymore, but there was there was a perspective in it, there is a perspective in it in DEI that there are some groups of people in our society that historically have not had the same advantages of others, or indeed may have had historically disadvantages systemically, and that we need to try and recognize those things and mitigate them in some way, right? So if you're saying we want to treat everybody equally, it means we're wherever you are, we're going to go from there, and we're going to give you the same thing, and you have your chance, the same as everybody else to make it. I get that. That's one American view. There's another one that says we have a responsibility to redress historic practices in the past. And you're going to have a committee, and you're going to research, you're going to try and figure out what those are. If you want people in your community to get together and maybe air some of their experiences, and say maybe we're not going to do school exactly the way we used to do it, because we have different groups of people now here who respond differently. So it's a commitment to taking a look at these things. And it's not because you're blind or you have some other kind of handicap. There's something societal and systemic and historic that we want to take a closer look at and address. So the word equity includes that, and the DEI policy includes that. If you're saying, no, we reject that and those premises, that's fine, but I think that's what you're arguing about without saying.
I'll say I reject it.
I reject it straight up.
Okay. And now,
I personally think that you keep talking about groups. We have 3,200 students here. I want to look at them as individuals, and I want to say whatever each individual kid needs, we're going to do it. And whether it's based on some historical prejudice, some historical deficiency, or deficiency they have now, that's what I want to address. And that's why I took the word group, and I said, whatever barriers for each individual prevents them from participating in it. But the idea that this board and that this school district is somehow responsible for fixing what some perceive, or many perceive, or everyone perceives as some historical wrong, yes, I'll say that. I do not accept that as my responsibility as a board member of the Jericho School District.
speaking as Eric, I truly respect that view. You've articulated it. And there are other views.
Absolutely.
But that's what you're really talking about.
And I actually thought that, I hoped that we had moved past what I felt was a reactionary environment 5 years ago to say, okay, what from that policy? Because look, there are people who say this whole piece of paper should be thrown out. It's like, it's a passé idea. What I do think came here from this conversation is that there are principles that this district should be committed to for each individual student, regardless of where you think they came from, where they did come from. You know what? It doesn't matter. But it's like, this is what we want. We want every kid to have an opportunity to succeed here, that we are going to do our best to work to mitigate all those things. And remember, there's this a whole other part where you're talking about, compensating for those things. We have this whole thing about, we're going to incorporate the perspectives of those people that you're talking about, which again is related to curriculum. It doesn't even have to do with the opportunity that kids are going to have to learn here. So as I've always said to you, I appreciate that view. I just don't see how or why the Jericho board, that's our focus. Our focus is our individual 3,200 kids here and making sure each one of them has an opportunity, not even an opportunity, each one of them will succeed.
Sam, going back to your other point, I think the question that has been raised in the first sentence, maybe possibly considering the district must ensure that all students have equal and differentiated access to educational opportunities, may give that personalized nature that you just referred to and make that distinction that I think we're trying to make here. that equal doesn't mean one size fits all, it means that we're gonna do whatever each kid needs.
Or the word appropriate.
But again, I'm not saying, you see, I think the problem is, and I'm gonna stop talking, the opportunity isn't differentiated. Everybody's got the opportunity. How you get to take advantage of that opportunity is what I'm talking about. So when you talk about a differentiated access, or when you say have equal and differentiated access, well, that's A, contradictory. But B, even if you said everybody has differentiated access, you're now providing unequal benefit. You're providing a kid something that another kid doesn't get. And I don't understand why, there are parts of this that I could fully accept other arguments that I have, which is why it's morphed a few times. The equal access to opportunity, I'm not sure what it means.
I'm putting out there, but I would say, and again, most people in this room probably have more experience than I do at having multiple kids of their own. But when you have multiple kids of your own, you recognize that your kids need different things. So you treat them fairly and equally, but that doesn't mean you give them exactly the same thing.
100%.
So I feel like I get your point, and I don't know if there's a way to use language that sort of encapsulates both concepts.
I have an idea. I have an idea. What about just even, I mean, I don't know if this makes this better or worse actually, but just taking out the word.
I appreciate your
equal.
honesty.
I'm just throwing it out there.
No, of course.
But just taking out the word equal and just saying have access, because if you're giving a kid access and they're able to make use of it, necessarily it's differentiated and necessarily it's specific to that kid and their needs. What about just taking out equal?
On first read, I don't have a problem with that. I figure I'm gonna get things thrown at by that corner of the room if we take out, access. That's like, but yes, I'm happy to accept that.
I mean, I don't love taking that, I'd love to put in equitable, but
I prefer having the word in than having it removed.
taking it out, okay.
I think it reminds us that we're trying to get to a place for everyone.
So is there an additional adjective, not differentiated, but an adjective? I mean, there's for teaching word meaningful, equal and meaningful access to that.
You say the words, but we don't know what they.
Can we run this through AI?
I was just pulling up
Damn it!
Having done this on the, like, GME, the.
You've done this on much larger scale.
Yeah, I mean, we've had to deal with this for the last year and a half, and this is what I do every day, and the way that we think about this is any meaningful access is really helpful, and defining what meaningful access means. I mean, meaningful means you're able to not only provide it, but that the person receiving it is able to use it. We use this a lot in language access, right? So when we provide interpreters in the healthcare setting, just using the interpreter doesn't mean that everyone has equal access to it. But meaningful access means that the doctor or the pharmacist or the nurse actually uses it in a way that the patient can understand what they're talking about. So the term meaningful is very clearly defined in the ACA, actually, the Affordable Care Act, and in other Department of Health and Human Services documents around what that means. And I like the term, I live in the term, so I don't know if that's something we can just think about, but meaningful has a responsibility that's bi-directional, not just in the person who's getting the opportunity, but in the person who's providing the opportunity, which is what I think we're saying, that we want to be able to provide it in a way that's accessible to everyone. So I like the term meaningful, but again, I'm not sure in the educational realm if that has the same, if it lands in the same way, but meaningful, and I don't love the term equal, but I know that we're having a difficult time finding an alternative, but meaningful and equal would still be a step in the direction that I think this conversation is lending itself towards.
Just a suggestion, if we talk about using it, and again, I don't have an opinion on this at all. Regarding ambiguous words, the easiest way to fix an ambiguous word is to put the ambiguous word in, define it in the policy.
Yeah.
And I know what you're saying, that's a good idea, so you can pick whatever word you want.
Right, the really easiest way is to use unambiguous words.
Then you can define the ambiguous word, then it's no longer ambiguous.
I like using the term equity is ambiguous. Like,
Absolutely it is. That's what I guess the question.
We've already
so I.
I guess the question is,
Right,
in the
but-
old policy, in the current policy that's in the book, we have this definition of equity. Does the board have an issue with the definition of equity as in that policy? Forget the word equity.
Yes.
You
No,
don't-
it's as it is in that policy.
It's not here.
No, not in Sam's policy, and the old,
And it's
the
not,
policy,
it's
the other
not,
policy.
it's not the definition Sam read from.
It's the definition that Sam read, yeah.
Here, equity includes, but is not limited to. As soon as you add is not limited to,
Yeah, but
then
not
make
limited
it,
to.
hold on, to seeking fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement for all.
But you can just change that, you can make that meaningful. You can make that whatever you want.
You can just read it again.
Whatever word you want.
Equity includes, but is not limited to, okay, equity includes seeking the fair treatment, access, and, the fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement for all, while striving to identify and eliminate barriers.
But now we're saying, don't use equity and plug it in with something else and define it.
We're not using the word equity.
Yes, that's
We're
what
not
it
using the
does.
word
Yeah,
equity.
so then we can define.
Make it meaningful.
So
That's your
meaningful-
definition of meaningful.
So can you just plug in meaningful, that you might have.
Meaningful includes seeking fair treatment, access, and opportunity, and advancement. I understood meaningful when you put it into the medical term, I get it.
I mean, maybe you could bring us your definition from medical definition, because what you said, the person receiving it has to be able to use it.
Right.
I mean, that's, and it probably said more eloquently, but that's the gist of it.
But you see, nowadays, we're not talking about a service here, we're talking about the access to an opportunity. So here she's talking about you have to have meaningful use of the interpreter. I see that as different than access.
We're just using a word from there, fair access.
Equal and fair,
No, we're just taking out equal and saying fair access.
and all students have fair access to educational opportunities.
I like
What is fair meaning?
Yeah, you're gonna have a field day with it. I'm gonna have a field day with this one.
I
can't.
At least he's honest about it.
100%. The minute you put this in policy, I'm attacking the club thing. I'm telling
Which
you
one
right
are you, which word is less,
now.
less?
I can argue my child did not have meaningful access to creating a club at Jericho High School.
But does it change whether you use it for meaningful, fair, equal?
I'm just saying, like, when you use the word equal, meaningful, fair, in my perspective, my child did not have a fair, meaningful access to something.
They have equal access?
I believe they didn't have equal access, and I proved it.
So let's take that out, take that out anything, just do what you said.
Take it out.
Just do access.
I don't know, Dr. Hartnett, do you feel fair, you prefer equal?
I don't know if it prefers equal.
I'm just curious because he's, I can do this.
Well, if I take what you were talking about with meaningful, right? Isn't that the idea of ensuring that barriers do not prevent individuals from getting necessary services and care? Is that a concept that you could add to this? Is there
Don't we have that in here?
We have something close with
Identify
barriers.
that
We
prevent
do,
individuals from participating in the learning
It
process.
might, all I'm trying to say is that might be a place to tweak that and add, but that's probably the most basic spot
I
for
do
it.
have to say, the policy is very inclusive of everything that I think everyone here is talking about. We're just asking to add one word, which honestly is not gonna change the fabric of this policy, so we can sit here another 2 hours arguing about meaningful or not, I get it, but as long as the meat of the policy is there, I think that's the most important thing. I think this wasn't also a 1, 2, 3 thing to get here. I think there was multiple
again,
steps and multiple layers of discussion.
I will say, and I said that before, I appreciate that there was a serious process. And even if we think about, there was a lot of statements recorded about what our intentions are and our approaches, and I think that's important to have out there too.
By the way, we still have 2 blanks here for who the superintendent's gonna designate.
I said it should be Hartnett and Sundberg.
Wow, look
No,
at
we
it,
don't-
he's taking over from
we don't-
Andy
we don't wanna-
and Salzman.
We're done now, we're far away.
I want to echo Dr. Hartnett's earlier statement that he's thankful that you have engaged in this earnestly, and language has changed a lot over the last few weeks. starting with eliminated completely to one draft, and I see it changing, so I appreciate there's an attempt to
Baby steps, baby steps.
reconcile different views, even though I'm still seeing a fundamental disagreement that this can't compromise away. The committee, as it was, did conduct a very robust, comprehensive survey of nearly every student, grades 7 through 12, in the school last year. And we only just started subjecting the data we got to analysis. And I will say that the work we put into it was rigorous, and the standards that we applied to the correlations we were looking at were at very strict levels of significance that we were looking for. It's just an example. I'm not saying this is an urgent need, but one of the things that began to bubble through, and this is not a presentation of the research of the data, but I can say this with confidence. Asian students, who were the majority of this district, were reporting significantly lower levels of belongingness than white students. And it's a very fascinating thing in a place like this, which is so high achieving. And we're looking at an aggregate, not individual kids, but that a majority of students, for all kinds of reasons that we have not begun to, and may never begin to look into, we're reporting a lower level in certain constructs that we know are correlated with learning than a minority of students. And it was just a really fascinating thing to begin looking at. And so to not have the committee, or to say that correlation may not, we don't care about it. We're not going to treat anybody any different. We're not going to change what we do, even though we know this thing. There are times to ask these questions and look at groups, and just looking at data is not good social science, and it's not good leadership or policy, but the conversations that could come from talking about that might be valuable. And maybe somebody else will create a committee without board policy, and that might happen. But that's one of the things that you're kind of turning away from right now. And it's not the kind of thing, I hope it's not something you're saying we don't think is important, or we don't want to address.
I think any unhappiness or discomfort, dissatisfaction, underachievement, disabilities, of course we want to address it. I want to say surprised by what you just said, but okay. Again, I'm not necessarily sure. I should say, I'm sure. I don't think that's something that falls under a DEI, formerly DEI policy, because I'm confused, because like I said, if you've got a group that represents 80%, how does that deal with diversity, equity, and inclusion? Not that we're using those words, if there's clearly something there. If that's what your study found, there's clearly something there. It's got nothing to do with diversity. It's probably got nothing to do with equity, and it's probably got nothing to do with inclusion.
It has everything to do with inclusion. It
has everything to do with
That policy, the current policy covers this, and it's an interesting point you just made, because my kids feel the exact opposite. They don't get highlighted because they're not doing the traditional Jericho stuff, meaning my kids aren't in band, my kids aren't in Regeneron, my kids aren't in science, but guess what? My two daughters play lacrosse. My daughter had varsity lacrosse yesterday. I sent an email to the board. She never gets highlighted. They had their senior day. Not a single message from the school. Where's the equity in that? So my point is, like, there's the flip side of it that I think is ignored, and while those kids' feelings are valid, I think my kids' feelings are valid as well. And the current policy doesn't cover this issue that we're talking about, so whatever work you put in, it's still not gonna fix the problem.
It's not gonna fix the problem, especially when they, like some say, Asians, And to be honest, being as an Asian myself, I know DEI was the reason that we are being excluded from a lot of college. So using Asian as an excuse that we need to have a DEI is completely lost to me. Because we're the one being targeted and excluded from college because of being Asian. So there is no equity for Asians.
DEI was helping
We're talking about
the.
Jericho, we're talking about what goes on
But,
in
but
Jericho.
he's talking about Asian, he brought up Asian, so
I
I'm
know, but
addressing Asian.
Asians are not being excluded in Jericho. We wanna find a way to make people feel more included
Is
in
where-
Jericho.
I already felt included, like we are already included.
But the study, the students did not feel included, and that's a concern. When you find out as a board member that a portion of the students don't feel included, it's our job to figure out why and do something.
But how
But
can
I think what we're
policy
saying
fix
is it's
that?
got nothing to do with what we're talking about.
But if the it was.
But it's got nothing to do with it. If you have 100% of the population, if you go to a country, it's 100%, you go to Iceland, they're 100%, and you take them, they're all alcoholics. I mean, is it because they feel like they're not included? Or there's no diversity? No, it's just, unfortunately, it's a problem, because there's 22 hours a day of darkness, but it's got nothing to do with that they're all Icelandic and they're all 6'2" and blonde. It's like, you look at, you're putting you're attributing this to something that's got nothing to do with what this policy is about.
And
We
the
can
existing
deal with all
policy
that.
doesn't address it, that's the point, like, the existing policy that you guys are touting doesn't address the problems that are already existing, so clearly the policy doesn't work. Why you're trying to revert back to that policy is mind-boggling, because literally the kids are saying there is a problem and the problem's not fixed by the policy.
That's not true, we haven't.
That was.
We've had it for 5 years.
4 years, that policy created a committee that created the survey that found those results, so, I mean, I think.
But that was years ago. No.
Well,
that survey was just administered last year.
No, last year, 2 years ago.
Last year, the survey was just.
Last year.
So if my kid,
Okay, so
if my kid said the opposite of the 80%, how would you address that?
What'd you say?
If my child said the opposite of the 80%,
Of course, and that's a valid perspective too.
but how do you address, my question is, how, you have the data, how have you in the last 12 months, and I'm not blaming you, using the existing policy for DEI, addressed my child's problem in this district? My 4 children, actually. How has that been addressed with the existing policy? It hasn't. You know how it's been addressed? I come here and I'm a nuisance to the board.
You're not a nuisance.
No, but that's the reality of it. The policies aren't doing what you guys intended to do, and I'm telling you that as a parent of 4 children. They are failing the kid. The policy has failed the children, period. No offense to anybody. It's not. I can give you examples. I've had to advocate for my children directly to administration to get what I need. Your policies don't fix the problem. Administration fixes the problem, parent advocacy fixes the problem. A written piece of paper is not gonna fix the
Well, they're not
problem.
mutually exclusive options though, right? I mean, we agree that parent advocacy, discussion, all of this is a solution can be multifactorial. I think that's an important piece.
But if you're sitting there if you're not me or another parent that's outspoken, the hundreds of parents that text us constantly with issues because they're afraid to bring it forward, the policy should technically be protecting those parents, and it's not protecting the kids.
And adding the word meaningful probably won't fix it either, so.
No, it'll give you a point to poke at, and somebody who wants to exploit that word will exploit it and say, my kid doesn't have meaningful X. And then you're gonna have 504, whatever it is. Why does my kid not get extra time? It's not meaningful. Well, you have to go look at this policy. There's already policies and laws that exist for these things. Like, you're trying to shoehorn an issue that's not an issue.
The more I've listened, the more I honestly have less understanding the concern about equal access to educational opportunities. I just thought, everybody here, you go to other districts, you have to apply to get into an AP class. Here, you show up, you sign, you put it down on your schedule, you're in the AP class. Here, you wanna be on a team, you show up, you try out for the team, you make the team, you don't make the team, you get out. Presumably, you wanna join a club, everybody can join the club. Yeah, form a club, but you can join a club.
you know, everybody wants lunch, you can go get lunch. So everybody's got the access
Nobody's
to
disadvantaged
everything,
here.
no one's disadvantaged. What they're doing with that opportunity, everybody here, even when we're talking about meaningful, and we're talking about we gotta help this kid or that kid, that again is all going back to outcomes. We shouldn't be dictating what that outcome is. We're simply saying, we're here to provide a service. We're providing boatloads of service to this. We provide, that's why everybody wants to come here, because you can take Calc BC, you can take differential Calc Physics BC, programming and all this other stuff. Everybody can show up here and take that. Now, that's all that first part is saying. It doesn't matter who you are, you have equal access to all those opportunities. Now, when you get to taking those opportunities, that's where the 10 points come in, or really, when it refers to that, 5 or 6. We're gonna get rid of the barriers. So if you can't see, we're gonna give you whatever translation you need. You can't speak English, we're gonna give it to you. I understand the meaningful part, and maybe there's a place for meaningful in one of the 10 bullet points, because I understand what you're saying, but to say that we're gonna give meaningful access, we want everybody to have access to whatever opportunity they have here. They have to go in, they have to take advantage of it and try to be successful. But I'm sort of don't know where we're trying to go. I think as Dr. Sundberg said, there's a differentiation, but other than Dr. Sundberg, I haven't heard anyone say that we're trying to remediate what some perceive as past injustices. And if someone on the board thinks that, then let's talk about it. But I believe the only person I've heard say that so far has been Dr. Sundberg. So we're past that. So now we're really back to, I think we spent half an hour talking about whether we're using equal, meaningful, or fair. So what I would suggest is, in the interest of, maybe we need to do some thought on this, maybe we need to do this,
Well, this is
accept the first
reading.
read and say, the word that we really have circled here is equal access, and maybe putting the word meaningful somewhere, not in place of equal, maybe lower down where it talks about they're gonna, students have, you know, in which students have meaningful opportunity to learn and realize their full potential, so instead of equal opportunity. I don't know, because maybe there's a difference between access and opportunity. And that would be where I get to, because, you know, no one wants to turn into a pumpkin at 10:30. But again,
I would just like to
go ahead.
add, and maybe just put in the concept of a committee here, and maybe it's not a mandatory, but it just for the.
If you'd like to say, you're saying something like, at his discretion, the superintendent can form a committee to do this?
I would love that, because I would like just to show that that is an
Since
important.
he's smiling, that it's putting on his. Okay, so the two things that we're gonna talk about and discuss for next time are, one, is there some, if someone could, I still haven't heard a better word than equal access. Maybe there's a way for Dr. Glen's word of meaningful somewhere in what we're trying to do. No issue with that. I don't know what the word means, so I have to AI it or Google it or Gemini it. And we can talk about what we want to do about a committee. The option of putting a committee in, I don't think we have to say the superintendent has the option to put a committee for DEI, because he always has that option to.
I understand that, but this.
If you're talking about
policy-
signaling someone,
Yes, I just feel like it's an important message.
Can all parents have meaningful access to all committees?
that is something we are working on.
Thank you.
Not in this policy, but we're working on it. How many days has it been, sir? 310, I apologize, to reverse 10,000. There's just so much 310 can do to reverse 10,000. I'm sorry, math is bad. 11,000.
No, but it's a fair point, you know.
It's absolutely, hold on, Mr. Briney, it's absolutely a fair point, and it's a fair point that I'm saying that there's 315 or 310 days to reverse 11,000 is sometimes very hard. There's sometimes there's hurdles that can only get crossed at some point. So, as discussed for future acceptance, do we have a vote? Is everyone comfortable voting on all 4 policies at once, or do we need to break one out because someone wants to vote against the adoption of one or more of these
Yeah, I
policies?
think we should break out the.
That's fine, I'll break out whatever you want. Okay, so can I get a vote on, so we're gonna change the motion now. So do I have a motion to accept a first reading of 3271 solicitation of charitable donations, 3280 use of school facilities, and 5741 artificial intelligence. Do I have a motion? Second.
With the
Thank you, Mr.
changes.
We'll get discussion with the changes as we previously discussed. Can I get a vote on accepting the first read? All in favor? 5-0. Okay, now we move to policy 3430, now such renamed as Opportunity for All. Can I get a motion to accept the first reading? Thank you, Mrs. Barno, thank you, Mr. Jin. Any further discussion? As with the changes that we talked about and the highlights that we're gonna have for our sectors, all in favor of accepting the first read?
I thought we were not accepting the first.
No, we're accepting the first read. The two issues that are open that we're gonna think about more is, are we gonna change equal or add the word meaningful or some other word in here somewhere? And are we gonna put a sentence in here saying, you know, that at the superintendent's discretion, he can form a committee to address this? And as I said, this goes back to, we're just trying to get so we can get to a second read. And if we reject the second read, we reject the second read. If we make a change, it's the same way we've done with all the policy we've done so
So why
far.
did we separate this one out?
I
Because
thought
she
you
has
said, I
to.
thought you guys wanted to vote against it,
Yeah.
because Sam just asked, do you wanna break it out if someone's planning to vote against it?
That's why. I'm happy to do whatever you want.
Okay,
Well,
so.
it's already separated, so just.
Okay, it's already separated, doesn't
It's
matter.
5-0, 5-0.
Oh, it's there's three, two.
Yeah, I would like to
And
table it.
bringing it up at another meeting.
There's
Well,
no
we
point
can
to
break it up
guys.
another meeting.
The 99% of this is done, there's no point to table this, we're no.
This is more done than most of the policies
Correct.
we've accepted the first reading on. And this is good steps. But like I said, that's why we're breaking it out. If people don't want to accept the first read, we want to accept the first read. So,
There's still opportunity to make changes in the second read.
yes. All in favor of accepting the first read? 3, all opposed? Any abstentions? 3-2, first read accepted. Do any of my fellow board members, sorry, I should have been using the mic. That was accepted 3-2, with the 2 open items. Do any of my fellow board members have anything they want to raise before we adjourn? Anyone who's put in 3 hours, anybody out there? Did we do opportunity for public?
No, we did not.
I apologize. We will, very hopefully, who knows how long. Opportunity for public to be heard. If you would like to make a comment or ask a question, please approach the microphone, tell us your name, and if you're representing a specific group, your affiliation. If you'd like your statement to be included in our board minutes, you must hand a written copy of your remarks to our district clerk, Victor Manuel, before leaving tonight. As always, public discussion on matters related to staff and students, during which their reputation, privacy, or right to due process, or those of others, could in some ways be violated, is prohibited. Microphone is here. Seeing no interest, that is closed. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Mrs. Citron, second, Mr. Jin. All in favor of adjourning? We will see you on Monday evening, May 11th, 6:30, to discuss the 700s, 7,000s. Thank you very much.